Mike. Good afternoon. Welcome. It's great to see you all. I hope you're enjoying Phoenix so far. We are here to learn how to present like a pro. I'm Christina Shenby, and one of my passions is teaching, education, and teaching other people how to teach. And I'll let my other distinguished co-speakers introduce themselves.
All right. Not Mike, I'm Sarah DeMeo, so I'm currently living actually here in Phoenix, the East Valley. So thank you, SAEM, for coming to town. It's convenient for us. My background is that I did a fellowship in multimedia design, educational technology, kind of a mouthful, but I did that at UC Irvine for 2 years after residency in Tucson, and really learned a lot about using sort of slide design and how to engage your learners. So that's kind of what I will be focusing on today, and happy to be here.
Thanks. Tracy?
I'm Tracy Sanson, coming to you from Tampa, Florida, and I started out my career in the military in the Air Force after residency and was immediately put into education director. So that's when I started realizing that you have to know how to give lectures, and have built on it through that over the years. And I'm currently an independent contractor, and about 50% at least of my work is speaking nationally and internationally. So I'll be talking to you about how to take it to that next level of actually getting paid.
Excellent.
I am Mike, actually.
Perfect.
So my name's Amal Matu. I'm a faculty member at University of Maryland. And background, I've been at Maryland for many years now, since 19 or something. And I started out, I was a program director for about 10 years or so. And I then became the director of a faculty development fellowship, which I still oversee. I started out as, after residency, I did a teaching fellowship. And so I've always had an interest in teaching. And I love lecturing. Most of the lectures I do are to my kids, so nobody listens. And so I travel to find people that'll listen to what I have to say. And so that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And I work at UNC Chapel Hill, and most of what I do is faculty development. And I also co-direct the ASAP Teaching Fellowship. So if you have not, has anyone taken that? Who great, and Sarah. So if you haven't, that's a wonderful place if you are wanting to develop your teaching skills. All right, enough preamble, let's dive in. You are here to learn to present like a pro. These are your 3 take-home points. 1, giving great talks is important for you, and you can do it. Second, you can learn from watching both good and bad talks. So after today, for the rest of SAEM, I want you to, not in a judgy way, but in an observational way, watch other people's talks and see what you like, what you want to take, and maybe what you want to avoid. And what we're going to give you here are some principles, or the ABCs of giving a great talk. There are handouts on your table. I encourage you to pick up one of those and pick up an old school pen, which is like a stylus but with ink, and take some notes. You won't need your computers right now unless you want to take notes on them for a while, so you're welcome to stow those devices, stow your phones. Studies have shown that even having a phone on the table next to you makes you perform less well on complex tasks. So that's your first freebie tip here. And if you're in the back, you're welcome to join a table up front. We're going to do a lot of table work and group work. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. We are going to involve you today. So you are going to plan a talk, and you won't design a whole PowerPoint, but you're going to have a chance to think through the elements of a successful talk. So what do you want to improve about your speaking? Why is it that you signed up to come here today? We have 2 or 3 people. You're smiling, so that means you have an answer.
To build better PowerPoint presentations.
Excellent. We're going to do a lot of that. You're going to love it. Who else? Yes?
To connect with multi-generational.
Ooh, I like that. And we have a few different generations in the room, so I encourage you to think about that too and talk about it at your group tables. What else? What other reasons?
Keep the students awake.
Keep the students awake. Yes. The never-ending difficulty. And don't worry, if any of you fall asleep here, Sarah has been given a little privilege of smacking you on the head if you fall asleep, so you have that to look forward to. Any other reasons?
Learn how to talk to larger audiences. I feel like I only talk to residents.
Mm-hmm.
Branch out to larger groups.
Good.
Engage with larger groups.
Yes. How many of you would say, I get pretty nervous speaking to larger groups? Yeah, pretty common. You know, other than death, public speaking, I think, is the #2 fear that most people have. So we'll hopefully address that a little bit at the end too. So what I want you to do to start is to do some introductions at your group, at your table, because we're going to do some work in a group. If there's a lot of people at one table, you're welcome to come up to a different table. If you don't like the person next to you, then go ahead and stand up and move now, because it'll get awkward later. And Amal, Tracy, and Sarah and I will rotate among your tables. So just take 5 minutes. You don't have to give your whole CV, but just briefly your name and where you're from. Go for it.
So I crashed a party. Yeah, so Gary Brandbecker, practiced in years. Now I teach
Did you all get a chance to introduce yourselves? A minute? Okay. Okay, now that you are best friends with your group tables, and if you're coming in, please join one of the 4 tables up near the front. Welcome. There's a seat right there. There's 2 seats there or 1 seat here. Welcome. All right, so why is it important for you to give a great talk? What are some reasons for you personally?
faculty promotion.
Faculty promotion, yep, so it's important to you to have that line item on your CV. Why is it important for you to do a good job at it?
Because I hate doing bad things.
Hate doing bad jobs, yep. Why else is it important for you?
I want it to matter. Like if you put all the time and effort into something, I want it to actually matter.
Yeah, want it to matter. Any other reasons?
Effectively convey knowledge to your learners.
Stuff some knowledge into our learners' heads. Yep.
I think more than stuff it, because the better you are as a speaker, the stickier it is.
Mm.
And so they're more likely to retain a few things of what you said.
So teach in a way that's efficient, that helps them actually learn well. And the answer is really, the reason it's important to give a good talk is to get whatever it is that you want. Whether it's, I want my residents to understand how to treat this condition, or I want to convince my hospital leadership to invest in ultrasound or in simulation, whatever it is. You're going to be giving a lot of talks for many different reasons over the course of your career, and hopefully doing it well will help you get what you want. Giving a talk is fundamentally about communication. It's not about a PowerPoint. And in Amal's part, he's going to talk about how to present without any PowerPoint, because that's also an important skill. This is one of my former mentors. When I was a nerdy undergrad, I'm still a nerdy person, but when I was a nerdy undergrad in chemistry, Bob Cava was one of my mentors, and we went to these weekly presentations in our department in chemistry. And I remember leaving one saying, that was a terrible talk, I didn't learn anything. And he said, Christina, when you're a good scientist, you can go to a good talk and learn a lot. When you're a great scientist, you can go to a bad talk and learn a lot. And that stuck with me because you can learn a lot, sometimes even more than a mediocre talk. You can learn a lot from even a bad talk. So that's why I encourage you to look at what people are doing during SAEM that's effective. Pick a few things that you want to, we won't call it stealing, we'll call it appropriating, mimicking, adopting. So pick a few things that you like about someone's slide design or about how they present and start to incorporate them into your repertoire. Also, this way at the end of the session, whether you thought this was good or bad, you can't say you didn't learn anything. So do some deliberate practice on your speaking skills. And also reflect. Next time you give a talk, reflect back on what went well, what didn't. We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on our experience. Our first lesson here is that preparing great talks takes a lot of time. If you've ever flipped through those homemaking magazines when you're in a doctor's office, and it says effortless entertaining, page 20. And you think, oh, effortless entertaining, that sounds good. So you turn to page 20, and it says 6 months before your event, begin growing a live moss table covering. 4 months before your event, plant the pine trees to gather pine cones. It's just ridiculous. It's not effortless at all. But it looks effortless because of all the work that has gone into it. And that's the same with giving a great talk. When it looks effortless, the more effortless it looks, the more time has gone into preparing it. So what matters more, what you say or how you say it? Has anyone heard of this rule, the 7% rule? If you haven't, then you will at some point. And it's based on some research by a gentleman named Mehrabian. And he did some research that is often quoted that says, oh, of our communication, only 7% is our words, 38% is our voice, and 55% is our body language. How does that, have a few of you heard that before? It's pretty common. How does that sit with you? Explains why are you good at body language? Do you interpretive dance? Yeah.
Just prance around.
Just prance around. Today, for DKA, I will be prancing. So this research is often misquoted. So this is the first myth that I want to bust, because you will often hear people say this. But actually, this applies specifically to when you are communicating something that is emotional, that deals with your feelings or deals with your affect. So now we're going to do a little exercise here. I'm going to ask you an emotionally laden question. Let's imagine, this is not me because you guys don't know me, but let's imagine I am your significant other partner. And I want to have you answer to communicate as many different things as you can. All right, so I'm going to ask you, do you love me? Somebody answer yes or no, and communicate or let's say yes, because no is kind of harsh. We've only just met. Answer yes, but communicate it in as many different ways as you can. How could you communicate a yes?
I could hug you.
Okay, yeah, so that would be a physical activity. How else? Can someone say yes in a way that conveys something? Yes, so we're hearing some doubt, like maybe I love you, but I'm not really sure.
There's tone, there's eye contact.
So do it. Give me an example. Say your yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so just very straightforward. Yes, I love you. How else? Absolutely. Oh man, oh, be still my heart, yes. Good, how else could you say it? What else could you communicate in that word yes? What if we say yes? What are we communicating there? It's annoying, yeah, annoyance, that it's obvious, maybe that you're tired of answering that question. So that's an example where the tone and the body language communicate way more than just the words. But if the question is, should I order a D-dimer on this patient? Then really the feelings and the emotion and the body language and the tone of voice don't convey as much. So if you see this and people tell it to you, they are wrong, this is not true, your words matter when you are communicating things that are less emotionally laden. But some of his other, and in his own words, Morabian got so tired of people presenting this at talks and saying, oh, words are only 7% of what you communicate. He got so annoyed by it, he said it's absurd to apply this to general communication. He did some other work that looked at what does make general communication and people more powerful as speakers. And some of the things were they used more intonation, they didn't use filler words, that's the likes, the ums, the uhs, and they spoke a little bit faster. Those were some features of powerful communicators. So myth 1 is that communication is only 7% speech. That is a total myth. Myth 2 is that some people are just born great speakers. You're going to hear Amal and Tracy, who are amazing internationally renowned speakers. They weren't born that way. I'm pretty sure anyway. I'm going out on a limb, but they weren't born that way. No one is born a great speaker. And that is very encouraging to the rest of us because it is a skill that we can develop. Now, myth number 3, if I'm afraid of public speaking or I don't like it, then I will always be afraid and I will never like it. That is also a myth. You can 100% overcome that fear or that anxiety of public speaking. All right, so we're going to dive in here now with our 5 principles. These are the ABCs of resuscitating a boring talk. Your audience, basic message, communication, design, and execution. And the handouts on your table will follow this same rubric, so you can jot some notes on there, jot some notes on the back, and it's the colorful one that is the main one to follow along here. Okay, so yes, thank you for getting the chair. So A is for audience. This is like the airway of your resuscitating a talk. What things, if you are giving a talk, do you want to know about your audience? Call some out. Size, knowledge, was it knowledge level you said? Yep. Who are they? Ooh, what do you mean by that? Yeah, good. So what level are they at? Maybe what's their attention span? Relevance. So how is the material relevant to them? How will they use it? Good. What else?
What's the setting?
The setting. Good. Are we in an auditorium or are we in a small group? Excellent. So you want to know your audience and know their prior knowledge. You could come and give the best talk about hyperthyroidism, but if they just learned about hyperthyroidism last week, then your talk is going to fall flat. You want to know the setting. If you have a big auditorium and lots of people, then opening it up for questions is usually flypaper for the wrong kinds of people. Those are the types of people who really have more comments than questions. You don't want them at an open mic. Whereas if it's a small group like this, which is what we wanted, then we can have more interaction. We can open it up for more discussion. Know your audience's goals and objectives. If you are speaking to your residents about the use of ultrasound in the ED, that's going to look very different than if you're speaking to your C-suite and trying to convince them to fund your ultrasound program. So they are not going to care about exactly how great ultrasound is. They're going to care about what's the return on my investment if I purchase these machines for you. What are my ongoing costs? What are some revenue streams? So you need to know your audience's goals or agendas. One way to get at this is called design thinking. Have any of you used this or heard of this? Do you want to share what do you know about design thinking?
I think people are better.
Okay, no problem. Design thinking is the idea that you start with an empathy for your audience that you're serving or the audience that you're speaking to. So you start with what is it that they will want to know, what can they use, who are they? I like that open-ended question. And then you get into defining what it is that you're going to present, ideating, meaning coming up with lots of ideas of how you could teach it, prototyping, so trialing it, maybe trial it with a smaller group before you then launch it with a bigger group, and then testing and iterating. So starting not with what can I talk about, but starting with what does the audience need to know? Not, oh, I need to create a lecture on DKA because they told me to, but what does the audience care about for DKA? How will they use this? So know your audience, find out what they've just done. If you can connect it to prior knowledge, Tracy mentioned earlier making it stick, making your learning stick. If you tie something that you are teaching to something that they already know, it is more likely to stick. It will stay in their memory longer. Understand what their spoken or unspoken needs are. Are they really worried right now about the in-service exam? And anything that you say about, you could give a great lecture about your future career planning, but their minds are just stuck in the in-service exam. Then you need to tie it into what they care about right now, which is their in-service exam. And it's always a good idea to scope out the room. Sarah and I were in the room here earlier. I was in here yesterday, making sure we had our whiteboards and everything that we needed. Always a good idea to scope out the room. So our first breakout, you guys are going to be working in your tables on this project, is to pick a topic idea from the left or a type of presentation that you want to workshop today. And I've got a whole range. It could be a medical talk to residents, to med students, to your faculty. It could be a grand rounds session, a TEDx style talk, which would be more storytelling, fewer slides. It could be a patient-facing talk. It could be a talk to your department about a new chest pain protocol that you're rolling out. It could be a medical director presentation that you're giving to the hospital or your department leadership. Or you could imagine you're the next ASAP president and you're giving your opening address at Scientific Assembly in October. And you have 15 minutes to inspire everyone to remain engaged in organized medicine. So at your tables for the next 5 minutes, I want you to first pick together, so one per table, pick which of these or come up with something else that you want to workshop today. And then on the whiteboards, or what are these, easels, on the easels, there should be a marker at each table. Write down audience at the top, and then as much as you can brainstorm about that audience. So you can pick it if you decide the audience is going to be 30 people, the audience is going to be 1,000 people. You can decide, but decide together at your tables and write as much as you can on your whiteboards, okay? Questions? Good? All right, have at it. And I'll join your guys' table.
What do you guys think? What's the type of topic you want to workshop? Are you leaning more towards student or admin? Or like which way?
I need help.
Probably the most relevant to most of us would be like the 30-minute medical talk. Yeah. For medical students. Probably the vast majority of what we do, unless somebody has something more specific they want to workshop. Anybody got a big talk on the topic? Then we will.
Okay, so I guess it would be one topic then. Like if you're doing 30 minutes. I mean, like.
To define the topic, or we just have to define the audience, setting the space and format?
Oh, okay.
We'll come back to the topic.
Okay.
36 really angry residents.
Hungry, tired.
They're tired. Just worked overnight. They're sleeping in the bathroom.
8 a.m. on Thursday morning.
30. So it's like 30 to 40, yeah.
Don't talk. Exactly.
And I guess so. I was gonna say with that you'd also have, you'd have, I'd say like 1 to 10, between 1 and 10 other learners. Yeah.
So what you got 10 medical students.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also, even when you look at that, you still have to really primarily gear it towards those residents with the understanding that it's going to be above and below for some of the other.
We have mid-levels that join us for communication, like this fellowship.
Smaller, yeah, maybe smaller groups, especially residents of the area.
It's like, well, when you guys do them when they're based off of something that you guys did the last couple of days, and you pull that, which speaks to something that you know, maybe that you just learned, maybe they just experienced it.
Depending on whether you are not a researcher, it's going to be really about how fast we're generating data. And make your choices, let someone else interpret the data and then decide what's going to happen. Or you can participate. And
So I guess
participate.
for the setting, I would just put, lecture halls, all conference rooms.
And so I thought we should start off with like,
No, this is just a workshop, theoretical.
I thought it was congratulate their responsibility in the fight
Because
for
one teacher in the front is so much bigger than your desk. So by the time you come back, the last thing you want to do is sit at the desk in a row in that format, just to.
I think that's why you get so many, there are so many people that don't stand in the lecture and then kind of walk along back and forth to try to separate that.
Okay, you'll have more time to workshop this if you haven't captured everything. But let's have each table report out briefly on what you picked. We start with Amal's table.
We picked a 20-minute TED Talk to 500 or plus more emergency medicine audience. That it included students, residents, and faculty. We figured because it was more of a TED Talk, it would also be recorded. So you have also worked that into it. There'd be no slides, so you would just have to kind of go with what you know. It'd be an auditorium setting, and we were talking either a new and exciting topic or a topic that you already knew, but presenting it in a new and exciting way, or inspiring.
Wonderful. Thank you. Tracy's table.
So most of us are involved in residency education, so we went with the traditional weekly residency conference, 30-minute style med talk. And that's usually, the setting is like a lecture hall that is usually too big for the amount of learners there. And residents tend to congregate in certain areas and leave a bunch of open spaces in other areas. Some of us were in more dungeon style,
Dungeon style.
natural light in the area. Our setting that we envisioned.
Thanks. And Sarah's table?
Ours is a keynote, residency graduation keynote
Ooh.
speaker. So the audience is the 12 third-year graduating residents plus some first and second years, their family, faculty, and the topic is on research, but being given to a group of people that's not very research heavy.
Nice. Great. That's a good challenge. And this table?
So a 30-minute medical talk in a lecture hall format to an audience of about 30 to 40 residents, faculty, I'm not looking at anybody as a talking tone example of how to present. 30 to 40 residents, faculty, medical students, a couple of ACP fellows, with the more small group case-based format with some audience participation involved, and then it should be relevant and applicable board prep style, concise but evidence-based.
Excellent. So we'll hold on to these topics that you will then continue to workshop. So now you have your audience. Next, the question is, what is your basic message? What is it that you really want to communicate? And here's where it is important to tune it into what's in it for them, which is abbreviated the WIFM. You can think about this as the wavelength on which your audience is listening. So you may be talking about some amazing thyroid research that you've been doing, but if your audience doesn't care, then nothing is transmitting. So you need to tune it into what's in it for them. And a way to think about this is going back to your audience brainstorming. What do they care about? How will they use this? What are they looking to get out of it? And a way to think about your message is, what are the contents? What's the facts that they would need to use and know or manipulate in order to solve a problem? Or what's the problem that I want them to solve? Maybe it's, I want them to be able to differentiate DKA and HHNK. And then that's the purpose. What's your desired outcome? So again, not just let me teach you about the thyroid, but at the end of this session, the learner should be able to differentiate thyroid storm from sepsis. And the angle is then how you sell it. This is important because your next shift, you could have a hyperthermic tachycardic patient who might look septic but is in fact in thyroid storm. Or you're taking the in-service next year or next month. This is going to be a question on it. So tuning it into what they care about, okay? So content, what is the facts? Purpose, what do you want them to be able to do with those facts? And angle, how do you tune it into what they care about? Now you might say, well, my learners just don't care about anything, except maybe the boards. I know for med students, you were talking about all they care about is the boards. Okay, well then we need to show them why they should care about this. Yes, your boards are important, but then when you go, imagine yourself in your third year on a rotation, somebody's gonna ask you this question of, does this patient have DKA? And you will need to know it. So if they don't care, it's not in their WIFM, try to show them why it should be. There is sometimes a disconnect between what the teacher is teaching and what the learner is learning because it is not tuned in to their wavelength. So you can reframe how you think about giving a talk. Instead of, what do I want to teach, or what should I cover, or maybe the program director comes to you and says, hey, what can you teach? We need a lecturer on Wednesday. Instead, think about, by the end, what should they be able to do? What problems should they be able to solve? You can frame it with these 3 questions. And often, a good talk will follow this arc. Why should you care? What are we doing? And how can you apply it? So we started out today of why should you care about giving a great talk? So show them the why, then show them the what, or have them work through it themselves, and then how they can apply it. And there's tons of ways you can do this. Cases, board-style questions, or just explicitly saying, here's why you should care about hyperthyroid. Here's how to diagnose hyperthyroid, and here's how you can apply it on your next shift. So these why, what, how questions can be useful for you to understand your own message. This framework can also help you create learning objectives. Now, if you are ever submitting a lecture idea to SAEM or ASEP, they will ask you for an abstract and some learning objectives. Learning objectives used to be my least favorite thing to write. I was like, why do they need to have learning objectives? This just seems so perfunctory. And I would create some lame learning objectives, like discuss hyperthyroidism, or review evidence about the thyroid, like really lame learning objectives. All of you at the end of this session will make better learning objectives than I did for like 10 years. Instead, frame it this way. By the end of this session, participants will be able to, and then fill in a verb. This is called Bloom's taxonomy. And it reviews the pyramid of different skills from just straight up remembering to understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So by the end of this session, participants will be able to differentiate hyperthyroid storm and sepsis. Or by the end of this session, participants will be able to appraise the latest research on hyperthyroidism. So you can use this, if you Google Bloom's taxonomy, you can find those verbs, or there's other verb tables. But think about, what do you want them to do by the end of the session, not what material do I want to cover. So some examples, I already kind of gave you some of these. Instead of just they will learn the thyroid, I want them to be able to define hyperthyroidism, differentiate it from sepsis, diagnose and manage acute thyroid storm, or maybe it's a higher level learner. I want them to be able to formulate a research project or a research question. The best learning objectives will depend on your audience and their level. So it always comes back first to the audience. Next, pick an interesting title. If you go to ASEP or SAEM, they usually, well now it's an app, but they used to give you those nice paper booklets. My Gen X is showing because I still like the paper booklets. And you would skim through and read the titles, and that's all you got. For ASEP, they don't even give you the speaker or the abstract. All you have is the title. So you are trying to hook that audience with just your title. So you need to pick an interesting title. And Amal, I don't remember where I saw you do this, but I saw some recording of you talking about speaking, and you said, well, if you want a good title, just put killer in it. Just put killer in it. And so I never talk about how to give a good talk. I talk about how to give a killer talk. So how to give a killer talk is what we're on today. Or instead of adult syncope, syncope with a lethal twist. Instead of facial nerve blocks, fixing faces painlessly. So see what this is doing? This is tuning it into the audience's WIFM. Do I care about facial nerve blocks? I guess. But what I really care about is being able to effectively repair facial lacerations without too much pain to the patient. That's what I care about. Do I really care about cardiology paper reviews? Not really. But do I care about papers that will change my practice? Yeah, I do. So pick a good title that will tune it into the WIFM, the what's in it for me, of your audience. These are some examples that I pulled from this SAEM, so we're hot off the presses here. And I encourage you as you're flipping through to look and see what you think of the titles. Pick out which ones do you think are really, really good, or which ones maybe don't interest you, and how could you reword it to make it more interesting. So next, at your groups, I want you to articulate your basic message. Remember, you can come back to those why, what, how questions. Why should the audience care? What are you teaching? How should they be able to use it? And create a title and 2 or 3 learning objectives. Learning objectives are, by the end of the session, they will be able to do X. And I'll put the Bloom's taxonomy verbs up there as well. Okay, so title, basic message, learning objectives. Questions? And if Tracy, Amal, and Sarah, if you want to rotate. I know, you were just vibing with just gelling with your group, but we'll come back, don't worry. Thanks.
We're just doing kind of your standard minute, 30-minute talk focused on residents, medical students. All right, so to articulate a basic message. So a title and learning objectives. What are we talking about?
I can use killer in that.
Those data are. You get the word death or any kind of death into your title.
What are the titles like hospital, assuming the trauma, leadership with conveying,
How about transfusion? So I feel like that gets boring. So
Let there be blood.
yeah, there will be blood.
There will be blood. There we go.
I like it.
So that's the title. And it's going to be about massive transfusion.
Yeah, I like it. I'm 100% stealing this for the rest of the podcast.
So there will be blood. You want to call it MTP in the ER, like doing a subtitle? Otherwise, Daniel Day-Lewis is going to come in and watching you to death with a balloon. And I have everyone in ready, so I apologize. There will be blood, MTP in the ER. Okay, cool. Title and learning objectives. So.
Identify who needs That's good. Select which patients are candidates for required reserving.
Okay. How to initiate, how to, okay. Okay, so, do you want to say, so, I mean, so if we go to how to execute. Okay.
Because a lot of people come to me, this is what
That's what I was gonna ask. I don't know like what level.
It's fair.
Or I guess it depends on the level of your learning.
I mean, we've got, as our audience on the side, students, she has a top
At the lower level,
at the end of the
it is, yeah, it is much lower on. Yeah.
But it's a good place to begin.
But also,
Who gets
maybe
it?
it could be like one instead of just being able to define it, maybe you should be able to explain it. Right? If you wanted to elevate it just a little bit, you should be able to explain MTP versus.
It's pretty like vague.
It is vague, but so.
Like defined as
my answer recently is
Space.
so define selecting these
Okay.
So one of the ways to get involved, and I wanted to I don't know if this is
I mean, if they're really
And then
listening,
ultimately,
about
like,
which
do
one
we
was a
want,
little bit higher level.
do we want them to be able to evaluate the literature supporting use of FTP in the ER? Like, is that one of our learning objectives that we want?
I think you're presenting this sort of what you're doing for them.
But this is what they're going to want to happen. You want them to leave this.
This is what we want them to see.
Yes.
I would like the what's in it for me element to be one of my objectives because I want them to understand that.
It's the easy button. But then you understand why the easy button exists.
Oh, I'm gonna go in and skip out there.
Why do I need to define this? Why do I need to define this?
I mean, so I think that's a like really good point. I think that they're like what's in it for me is going to be like MTP's the easy button, and I think including like complications with MTP and why just hitting an easy button is not a good idea.
Okay, what if we,
So
because most of your residents are not going to work in a large institution that has these rights, right? So could we say our final learning objective is to understand the principles of MTP in a non-trauma setting, or how to apply MTP to a facility that doesn't have that? You're working in a rural critical access ER, right? And you're going to, somebody's coming in with an SAEM, knowing what's in your blood bank, knowing the components of MTP, knowing how to create that from scratch says that you can, well, create.
Yeah.
But is that enough? What's in it for me for a resident learner, right? Or do they need something else?
So,
Making contrast risks and
I had assumed not.
just trying to think about some analyzing lately, because those are downside.
yeah, like distinguish. Yeah, being able to look at risks and benefits and kind of have that ability to do that analysis.
Well, I'm going to
How many objectives do you want in 30 minutes?
You only want like three.
Otherwise, they're only going to get some fills out.
tell them what you're going to say, you say everything you said. I mean, it's going to be, it's just, how do we do the structure around what does that actually have? So I thought I would have to offer a lot of structure.
So that would
And
be
to
our.
your point, to execute MTP, it can be broader than just, oh, you get this MTP order, you're trying
select patients, and then apply, you know, everything kind of builds up.
You can also think about it as like what to or, you know, so what is it, who does it apply to?
Okay, good discussions. Hopefully, let's start on this side. You want to tell us your title and your learning objectives?
Yeah, that's a big ask.
That's a big ask. All right, let's circle back and hear from each of our groups.
So we are creating a hypothetical lecture delivered to residents and medical students as part of like didactics. It is called, the title is There Will Be Blood, MTP in the ER. We are still working on our learning objectives, but right now what we have is, number one is defining or being able to explain MTP. Number two is who qualifies for MTP. 3, how to do it, and then 4, risks and complications.
Nice.
Or, as I like to put, death by
Death by MTP. Very good. Table in the back.
So the title of our talk is going to be Get in the Game, Doc. And the basic point is going to be talking about how research matters. So by the end of our talk, our participants will have concrete ways that they can participate in research. They'll understand their individual contributions to the research regardless of their level of participation. And then also they'll be able to develop a research question.
Beautiful. Sarah's table?
So for our lecture, we were going off the content of heart failure with a purpose of don't kill your patients, with the angle selling it as core content. We came up with our title of being Save a Drowning Patient from Their Own Heart, and we were starting the learning objectives to differentiate CHF from other pathology and to review the pathophys of CHF. We were starting to discuss some others.
Great. I like the title.
We hadn't gotten that far.
Okay, no worries.
We had talked about opioid dependence and trying to get discussion of Narcan as emergency department. We were still coming up with a title and thinking of a pain point, kind of like to draw in our audience. We were still working our way through our title and making it kind of relevant to everybody and talking about maybe family member medicine. That's about as far as.
Oh, that's good. The what's in it for me is this could be your family member, your community member. And most people will have had somebody that they know who's been affected by drug abuse or dependence. So look at how far you've come just in this short time together so far. You've had some great titles. If you get stuck thinking about titles or nothing is coming to you, ChatGPT is there to help you, my friend. You just put in, I want a pithy title about, I think I did it I was giving a session on empowering women and networks, and it was like power up or supercharge or something. It came up with just all these great ideas that then you can adapt. All right, so we've got our audience, our basic message. Next is how do we communicate this? And we're going to do communication, and then we'll have Amal speak, and then we will have a little break afterwards. So don't worry if you're like, when is there going to be a break? There will be a break. How do we communicate this very important message? Well, as George Bernard Shaw says, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. We tell our residents feedback all day. What do they go and tell the program director? I never get any feedback. You teach your residents all day. They go to the program director. Nobody ever teaches me. So there is an illusion that communication is taking place. What makes lectures effective or ineffective in emergency medicine? Well, this was a study in EM. Things that make lectures ineffective are being monotone. We're ER docs, our attention span is about 5 minutes. So if people start talking in a really low energy voice, then everyone fades out. Oh, I need to pep myself up after that. Going overtime. I don't care what you are talking about. If you go over and go into my coffee break, you're dead to me. I need my coffee break. So do not, no matter what happens, even if the person before you went over, you do not go over, ever, ever. They can invite you back later for the second part. Poor pace, going too quickly or going too slowly. When people come and they're like, yeah, well, let's take questions, let's make it interactive. And what happens, which is great, what happens in the last 15 minutes? Oh, shoot. I've only got 15 minutes, and I've got 57 slides to get through. So they just flip quickly through the slides. Don't do that. No, be prepared so that if it is interactive, then you can cut out certain chunks. If your talk is kind of modular, then you know, all right, if we're going quickly, I will do all 5 modules. If we're going more slowly, I can have a natural ending point and skip this other part. So know your pace. What makes lectures effective in emergency medicine? Again, this is from a paper. Having manageable scope. Not let's teach you all about all endocrine emergencies, but let's teach you how to differentiate and manage DKA and HHNK. Just that, just that. Having clear objectives. Sometimes you get the impression that someone was just asked to give a talk because they had an opening at 9 a.m. on Wednesday that they needed to fill. And so they dragged some poor soul in who's like, well, let me pull up my EKG talk that I gave when I was a resident and repurpose it here. So you need to have clear objectives. And then a knowledgeable speaker. But never be afraid as a speaker to say, I don't know. People will come up with great questions that you will not know the answer to. So don't feel like, I can't give a talk on this until I'm the world expert. Because you know when you're going to be the world expert on something? I don't know. For me, probably never. I'm never going to be the world expert on something. So if I wait until I'm the world expert before I start speaking, I'm never going to be up speaking. So be knowledgeable, but don't feel like you have to know everything. And then passion and enthusiasm. Now, I've got a few little videos, one video that I'm going to show you here. And because I had to use the SAEM computer, they would not let me use mine. No problem, SAEM folks who are watching the recording. But it means I just need to play it on here. So just give me a second.
Republican in times good, and I have been a Republican in times bad. Albert Einstein issued one of my most favorite quotes in the history of the spoken word, and it is as follows. In the middle of opportunity, excuse me, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. I'm going to repeat that so I have clarity tonight. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. The Stark County Treasurer's Office is a mess.
All right, that's quite enough of that. All right, so passionate, yeah, I'll give him that. I'll give him that. Let me go back to my slides here. All right, what was your reaction?
I can't understand what he was even saying.
What was he even saying? His one pivotal quote, he got wrong. As Einstein said, oh wait. Yeah, so maybe some of that like emotion body language that we talked about at the beginning was impacting his communication. Like, is he angry at me? Is he trying to get me to vote?
It definitely is eliciting kind of that fight or flight thing. You know?
Yeah,
It's
you're like,
too much. Like,
I either want to punch him or run away. I don't know,
so
maybe
it's really
both.
hard to focus on anything he has to say because
I had the urge to medicate him.
We need a B-52, please. Roommate.
Atomized ketamine.
Applying the principles you talked about, I'd say probably not for the first time in the history of the spoken word. Too much.
A little too much.
Emotion and enthusiasm.
Yeah, so a little too much, a little too much. But, so I play that one just as a funny counterpoint to the other problem that you've probably all experienced, which is all right, guys, I'm going to talk about the thyroid. And hey, yeah, I know it's the most boring organ. I agree, but Sarah, the program director, asked me to talk about the thyroid. So as opposed to way too much energy and passion to just not enough energy and passion, there's a happy Goldilocks moment there in between. Another principle here is that we learn better, our learning sticks better, when we are engaged, when we are involved, when we are active. Education is not a massage. It's not something your learners, you guys can't just come, kick your feet up and I'll massage some information into your head. It should be exercise. You should feel like you've been doing some thinking as the learner. This is something that always kind of hits me in the heart when I read it. It's from a book called Hitting Pause. She says the person doing the learning, the person doing this, look at that, I messed up my quote just like that dude. The person doing the talking is the person doing the learning. So the more that you can get your audience to talk, whether it's with each other, to you, maybe to themselves, I don't know, just get them talking, they will do more learning. So here are some keys for effective communication. Number one, it has to be relevant. Has to be relevant to your audience. Harness the power of stories. Humans are hardwired to listen to stories. And in medicine, we call stories cases. As soon as you say, oh, I had this 85-year-old woman, you'll never believe this, everyone is tuned in. They're like, oh, what happened? Did she die? What else happened? You are immediately tuned in when somebody starts to tell you an interesting case, because we as humans are hardwired to listen to stories. Third, keep the audience's attention. You may do a great job grabbing it at the beginning, you tell that story, you do a board question, but how do you keep your audience's attention? That is the harder part. Now, over an hour lecture or 50-minute lecture, people tend to start out with reasonably attentive. Then it starts to wane. And then right near the end, when the speaker says, and to finish, I will show you this. Or if you remember nothing else from today, remember this. And then you perk back up, because you're like, oh, they're almost done. I can go get coffee. So somewhere, I think about this like your O2 sat of your audience. So what do? If you've got a patient, they're maybe awake, not intubated, and their O2 sat you're watching starts to go, boo, boo, boo. What do?
Jaw thrust.
Jaw thrust, okay. So I'm gonna come jaw thrust somebody else. What else do you do? Poke them, sternal rub them, right? You go sternal rub that audience. So this is a sternal rub for your audience. You've got to think about, all right, boo, boo, I'm starting to see their attention fade. How can I sternal rub my audience to get them back in the game, to get them back engaged? And you kind of have to do that periodically. Just like with that obtunded patient, they wake up and then they start to fall back asleep. So you can do this in several ways. One is by planning specific things that you will do. Maybe it's a breakout. Maybe it's a think, pair, share. Maybe it's a multiple choice question. Or maybe you pause and tell a really interesting case or a really interesting story that brings your audience's O2 sat back up. Or you can plan a whole story where you have this case of this crazy case of this 85-year-old woman who came in the other day, and then you teach a principle that applies to the case. Then the case continues. And it's sort of a story interwoven with some learning points or pearls. A way that you can frame your resets or your sternal rubs for your audience are those why, what, how questions. So first, why? Do something interactive around why do we care about this? Maybe it's an interesting case. And then you can teach them a pearl, and then a what? Have some maybe case that they have to solve, maybe a more difficult one, or a game, or a discussion, or a challenge. And then a how question, a breakout or reset at the end for how can you now apply this? That's just one way. There are tons of ways. Find ways that work for you. Fourth, making it hands-on or interactive. And you may have $1 million sim center, or you may have, like me, styrofoam heads that I bought on Amazon. I don't know if you can see them, but this is a styrofoam head you can buy on Amazon, like everything in life. And I drew in red marker some lacerations. And then I brought some needles and syringes and had them inject and do pretend facial nerve blocks for how they would repair those faces. So it doesn't have to be high-tech and expensive. You can often find ways to make it hands-on or interactive for pretty cheap. Finally, make it fun. Learning is directly proportional to the amount of fun being had. When our brains are in a fight or flight mode, like that speaker who was yelling at us, we don't learn well when we're too stressed out. We don't learn well when we're too bored. We learn well when our brains are happy and having fun and engaged, which means we need to create a safe environment for learning. We learn better when we're not afraid or belittled when we ask a question. I was joking with this table that what type of session are we going to have? A lecture, case breakout, a pimp fest, just make it as toxic as possible. We learn better when there's an element of surprise. Oh, that's an interesting result of that case. I wasn't expecting that. Reward effort rather than correct answers. I know I don't know all of your names, but I'll try to learn some of them. Tasha. So if Tasha answers a question, maybe the answer is incorrect, but I will still praise her for thanks for bringing that up. Or that's actually a really common misperception. I'm so glad you brought that up. So rewarding people for engagement and discussion rather than just for correct answers. And the other thing that can help is maintaining engagement with each other is using their names. Whenever someone uses your name, Whenever I say Tracy, Tracy's like, Tracy, someone said Tracy. Her brain is just, immediately responds to her name. So if you can, as much as possible, say, oh, just like Tasha said earlier, now we're gonna build on what Sean brought forward, like not in a really cheesy, annoying way, like, and circling back to the prior note that Sean made over here. But as much as you can, using people's names will bring them back into the conversation and wake them up. And never embarrass anybody for answering a question wrong. That's a great way to just kill the vibe in the room. So refer to people by name. It shows that you were listening to what they said. Tie it in to what people said when they bring in a new point. And praise the contributions, not just correct answers. Okay, so our next step, and we'll have our facilitators rotate tables clockwise again, is to think about what tools can you use, again, just 5-minute breakout, what tools can you use to communicate well? Either some of the ones that I've said, making it interactive, make it fun, planning resets in, storytelling, other features you can think of. What communication strategies can you use for your session?
I definitely see what you're doing. But I think, in theory, though, yeah, like, if it's not incredibly relevant, it probably shouldn't be utilized, right?
The reality is you're not going to have that many hours in this consultation. That is also true. Let's say everybody's taking this course and everybody ends up on magical island. I guess that's sort of my question. Like, you have engaged speakers who are really dynamic, really trying, and
I remember when
how do you?
there was finally enough power in electronic health session. Finally enough.
Okay, let's share out a few communication strategies. Let's see, we started here last time. Let's start with my table in the back. Share your communication strategies.
So some of the tools we went over, of course, cases. We discussed, like, especially if you have like any personal experience, sharing that experiential learning. feel kind of like incorporating board review questions and then using multimodal modalities, whether it's visual learning or even auditory learning, if you bring in clips from patients, things like that, and then of course competition and gamification.
Competition is great. You don't want to overuse it, like you can't make everything a competition, but once in a while, break out in groups. We have the PGY 1s versus the PGY 2s or something like that. What's in it for them? They want to win.
So our topic is about opioid dependence and wanting to have Narcan, and spreading the use of Narcan, CBD. And our title is Saving Lives One Spray at a Time.
Nice.
And we want it to be interactive, so getting people to say how many have treated an overdose or how many have loved ones that have be experiencing with family. And then really coming up with a hook, like a story about how it's very personal. And then having our hand device, because none of us really actually do it ourselves. Other people do it, like EMS does it. But really having a physical interaction with your audience, like we have a device.
Excellent. Great ideas. What about your table?
We talked about using props as well. We went so far as to go on the fly style. So Piggy has the conch. MTP, you've got a bag of red blood cells. You want to answer that question, you're catching it. Sounds messy. And we also talk about using a case and stories to talk about why MTP is relevant.
Okay. Yep. Good. Stories, props. And final table?
We did a bit of brainstorming, but I'm not sure if we came up with a lot of concrete solutions unless I'm.
Talk about maybe telling a story,
Mm-hmm.
looking back, kind of using the story throughout our talk, kind of keep the audience communication like questions.
Great. Good strategies. So be creative. This is what's fun about giving talks, is coming up with new ideas or new ways to explain that godforsaken thyroid that nobody wants to learn about, coming up with new strategies. So now for our next part, to give us some more pro tips and advanced communication skills, I will hand it over to Dr. Amal Matou, who will talk about presenting without slides and storytelling. Yeah, is yours.
Really appreciate your time and effort in coming here. How many of you ate lunch? All right, so you all are the postprandial ones then. All right, so the rest of you will hopefully be in tune. I'm going to ask you, first of all, just start with a little exercise. It's not a group table exercise, but you don't have to close your eyes, but I want you all to just imagine it's August 28th, 1963, all right? Pretend what you're dressed in. And you're at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and there's 250,000 people around you. And up to the podium steps a gentleman named Martin Luther King Jr., and he starts out what will end up being an amazing talk. And he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here with you today in what will go down in history as one of the greatest demonstrations in human history for freedom in our country. May I please have the first slide?" It wouldn't work, would it? Not quite. Now, granted, PowerPoint was invented in 1987, but even then, if PowerPoint was around back then, it wouldn't have worked. Maybe you would have had a gigantic overhead projector, it wouldn't work. He didn't use PowerPoint, and yet it's one of the greatest speeches in history. What he did use was your imagination. He used your imagery. He called upon you to think about the red hills of Georgia and Lookout Mountain in Tennessee, the snow-capped mountains of the Rockies. And even right now, as I mention those words, every one of you is thinking of them, right? Every one of you just thought about red hills in Georgia. How many have actually been to the red hills of Georgia? A couple people, all right? So even though you've never been there, you in your mind have an image of what these red hills look like, and it made it interactive. He brought you into the speech, and he made you part of his speech. Well, for this session, Christina asked me to talk about two things. One of them was giving a lecture without slides, and I'll talk about the second part of that. But giving a lecture without slides is really tough, because I love slides. I love PowerPoint. I love putting together PowerPoint. I could put PowerPoint slides together all day. I love putting a lot of text on those slides, charts and pathways. Coagulation cascade's my favorite. If I could put the coagulation cascade in every lecture I do, I would be so happy. And I love putting a lot of slides. Usually, nothing fancy. I don't like animations and drawings and pictures, too much work. But just a lot of slides, dark background, bright colored letters. Times New Roman, my favorite font, okay? And I also have found that the more slides, the more words you put on the slide, the less work it is for me. Because, I don't even have to prepare for the lecture. I can just stand up there and I can read the slide, all right, just with you all. And as you read the slide, I also like the bouncing Disney ball kind of thing as we go through it, so we can all read the slide. You don't even have to look at me. I don't have to comb my hair. I don't have to wear a tie, get dressed up. In fact, with my height, I can pretty much hide behind the podium, all right? We can turn the lights down, and all you have to do is just look up there at the slide, and you pretty much get the entire presentation. And to me, a great lecture is when I can put so much information up there that you don't have to do any work at all. You can just lay there, stand there, sit there, and just soak in all of this information with no effort. Isn't that fantastic? All right. So that's why I love slides. But the one other thing that I also really love is I love teaching. I love teaching effectively. I love being able to walk amongst the audience and see smiling or interesting faces. I love that aha moment, when you're talking about something and you can kind of see the light bulb go off, and the student or the resident or the attending, whoever it is that you're talking to, suddenly realizes something that they never understood before. Now I get it. Now I understand why you can give amiodarone and adenosine to antidromic SVT-WPW, but if you give it to AFib-WPW, you kill the patient. Now I get it. Now I finally understand what that difference is. I love those moments. So that's one of the things that I really love about teaching. But these two loves of mine kind of are diametrically opposed. Slides on the one hand and lecturing versus actually effective teaching are often in contrast to each other. And part of the reason for that is because lecturing is really, really ineffective, all right? Does anybody disagree with that? Does anybody here think lecturing is the ultimate form of teaching? Everybody knows it's not, all right? In fact, many of you have probably seen this slide. This is my one slide, by the way. Many of you have probably, this is called the learning pyramid, or there's some other names. Don't worry about the statistics. The numbers up here are often debated, but I think the general theme here is the more active the learning, the more you learn. The less active the learning, the less you learn. And this is oftentimes talked about in educational theory, and one of the reasons why lecturing, pure lecturing, is typically so awful, all right? Let me give you, aside from those numbers, I'll give you a few more facts that perhaps you've never thought of before. People read at about 150 words per minute. So when I put all these slides up here, when I put all the words up here, you can probably, if you choose to, you probably read about 150 words per minute. In reality, if there's a lot of words up there, you just phase out, all right? I do it also. So people read at about 150 words per minute. People talk, so the speaker talks at about 200 words per minute. People think at about 2,000 words per minute. So no matter how many words I put on that slide, and no matter how fast I talk, there's no way I can maintain your attention. It's impossible. Even right now when I'm talking to you, I know some of you aren't here. I know some of you are on a beach in Tahiti. Some of you might be thinking about your dinner plans. Maybe you're thinking about your son or daughter who had a little fever last night. Maybe you're thinking about how hot it is. I know that some of you are not here. You come and go, and that's okay, and I accept that. But that's a big part also of why lecturing is oftentimes so awful. So why are we here? Why in the world are we here in the first place to listen to a lecture or listen to a session on presenting skills where lecturing is such a big part of it? Well, it's because we're practical. And the fact is, even though everyone knows that lecturing is very inefficient, and you hear people say this at SAEM and CORD and AEM And ASAP, in every educational conference you go to, you'll hear people say that lecturing is not an efficient way of transmitting information. Nevertheless, lectures are here to stay. Every conference you go to here, CORD, AAM, SAEM, your weekly educational conferences in your residency, there's a lot of lectures, right? Has anybody here completely gotten rid of lectures? Of course not, all right? It's one, almost, yes? In your med school, all right? So that's very rare. So lectures are pretty much here to stay. So if lectures are here to stay, you might as well learn how to get really good at it. And that's a big part of why we're here. The more interactive that you can make your lectures, and you'll hear about some of those techniques as we go, the better your sessions are going to end up being. And one of the most effective ways of making your sessions interactive is with storytelling. And that's one of the other things that Christina asked me to talk about. Storytelling in your lectures and your presentations is magical, right? I think since the beginning of the very first civilization, 6,000 years ago, stories have always been a part of the human experience. I have this image in my mind of cave people sitting around a campfire talking about their recent woolly mammoth hunt or their battle with the saber-toothed tiger, all right? Stories have always been a part of human nature. We're hardwired, like Christina said, we're hardwired. I think it's part of our genome that people love to listen to stories. We love stories. We bond with stories. We live for stories. Stories invoke emotion, and when you invoke emotion, you increase people's ability to remember what you have to say. And so I really want to try to convince you of the importance of stories. The other things that you can do with stories is when people seem to be falling asleep, you know, and that's why I asked who's postprandial. Some people might be fading off, and you just start telling a story. I've been in lectures right after lunch before, and I can tell people are fading off, but the one magical thing is, as soon as I start telling a story, everybody comes back from whatever beach they were on, from whatever they're doing at home, they all come back. If you simply say, you know, I remember one time, follow it up with anything. When people hear those words, I remember that one time, people come back. They come back to see you. So storytelling is so important. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. The other thing about storytelling is that it makes things very, very memorable. Neurophysiologic studies, we're getting into science here, neurophysiologic studies have been done where they did brain scans, I guess PET scans, of speakers and audience members. And what they find is that when somebody starts telling a story, both the speaker and the audience member have increased brain activity. There's increased perfusion to the limbic system, which is responsible for emotion, and also to the hippocampus, which is responsible for memories. So storytelling actually increases brain activity. If all you're doing is reading slides, that induces the communication centers of the brain. But with stories, it increases the communication center, the visual cortex, the mechanical centers of the brain as well. So it activates brain activity to a much, much greater extent, right? It's also one of the most important things you can do in terms of persuasion. And when you read about storytelling, one of the things that the research has shown, and one of the things that professional speaking coaches know, is that it's very difficult to convince people to change their behavior. And after all, that's what learning's all about, right? There's no point giving a lecture unless your goal is to change someone's behavior. It's a lot easier to persuade people to change behavior when you bring stories into play. Politicians know it. You always hear politicians tell stories. It's because their coaches, their speaking coaches, have told them, don't just focus on statistics and numbers. Focus on stories. So every State of the Union address always has someone in the audience. Well, you know, Mr. Jones, the plumber, I'll tell you about his story. And then I'll tell you about Mrs. Jones, who's from Canton, Ohio. I'll tell you about her story. And you hear all these stories because people know that when they hear a story, they're going to pay more attention. Even Hollywood celebrities know that if you want to get quoted, facts and figures are not enough. You've got to tell stories. Right. That's a really important part. Now, the one other thing that we can do is when you tell stories, it really emphasizes the importance of something. Now, granted, stories aren't always going to convey information, and medicine is medicine is composed of a lot of information transfer. When we give lectures, we want people to learn some certain things, and you can't always do that with stories, but stories can convey the importance of some information. I do a lot of EKG lectures. One of my favorite stories has to do with meeting the head of cardiology. A lot of people don't understand why cardiology can't seem to get it right with EKGs. Well, I remember meeting with the head of our cardiologist one time, and we were talking about something called De Winter T waves. Hopefully, most of you have heard of De Winter T waves. Cardiology's never heard of this before, all right? So literature was coming out about De Winter T waves saying we should be activating the cath lab for De Winter T waves because it implies that there's a proximal acutely unstable LAD. And those articles were coming out from the cardiology literature. You know, I would say the cardiology literature is great, but they've got to read it. So anyway, my colleagues were unhappy because they were trying to activate the cath lab. The cardiologists at 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning were saying, no, it's not a STEMI. There was a lot of fights, so I took some of these articles to the head of cardiology, and we sat down, really nice guy, and I showed him what the De Winter T wave was, and I showed him some of the articles. And I said, this is coming from your literature. How come you guys aren't activating the cath lab with this? And he looked at me square in the eye, and he said, Amol, we don't read that stuff. I said, what do you mean? This is your literature. And very honestly, he said, once you finish a cardiology fellowship and you get board certified, we don't read that stuff anymore. We read about stenting techniques. We read about different antiplatelet agents. We read about antihypertensives and other things like that. But the EKG literature, once we finish our boards, we never read that stuff again. And then he looked me square in the eye and he said, Amo, you're the ones that need to be the experts in electrocardiography. You're the ones that have to know about this stuff because we're not reading it. And I love telling that story with my EKG lectures because it really emphasizes how important it is to know EKGs, as an example. And that story goes a lot farther than for me to simply say, you've got to know EKGs really well, all right? Another story, when people sometimes doubt the importance of why it's important or who can know EKGs really well. Sometimes we'll get paramedics or junior faculty saying, well, I'm never going to know EKGs really well. And I'll tell them a story about back when I was in residency, we'd rotate with a world-renowned electrocardiography expert named Edward Chung at Jefferson. And people would actually rotate with him from all around the world just to learn EKGs. Well, one year there was this fourth-year Chinese medical student who flew all the way in from China, which wasn't rare actually, to spend time with him in the heart station. But he was going to be on campus for 6 months. And during these 6 months, he was going to spend 1 month in the heart station working with Dr. Chung, and the other 5 months he was going to spend rotating through the different wards. Well, there was a problem with his credentialing and malpractice or whatever, and so he wasn't allowed to see patients. So instead of rotating for 5 months, what he did was for 6 months, he just spent every day from about 8 to 5 in the heart station reading EKGs with Dr. Chung and reading all of Chung's books. And honest to God, by the time this fourth-year Chinese medical student was approaching the end of his rotation, every member of the house staff in the entire Jefferson Hospital system knew that if you have an EKG question and Dr. Chung wasn't available, you don't look for your attending, you don't look for the cardiologist on call, you find this fourth-year medical student because he was the second best electrocardiography expert in the entire healthcare system, Jefferson Health System. And it just goes to show that you don't have to have a special certificate or a fellowship or a diploma. Anybody can be fantastic at electrocardiography. Now again, I didn't have to tell the story. I could just tell people, you need to listen to me talking about EKGs, and it doesn't matter what year you are, you can be really good, but the story really conveyed the point. And so it's a fantastic way of really emphasizing key points. Now, I'm not going to spend time talking about how to tell stories, but just again, some key things that you want to do. Number one, when you tell stories, you need to make sure that they're relevant to your audience. Number two, you want to make them relatable, right? Know who's in your audience and make them relatable to your folks. One of my favorite stories is a very relatable story about my son, and it's in a lecture that I do on finding balance in your life and leadership. And some of you who've been to the teaching fellowship have heard this before. I've got 3 kids. They're all a lot older now. They're in college now. But back when they were young and actually I do this now when they're in college, I text it to them. But every night when I put my kids to bed, I whisper something into their ear. I whisper into their ears, good night, dream of great things. Your destiny is to save the world. Every night I would do that. Even now I text it to them. Well, I became program director when my oldest son was maybe about a year old. And nobody tells you how to be program director. You know, you just kind of have to figure it out. It's a lot better now where there's a lot of courses, but I was really having a tough time figuring this out. So I was going to all these different courses. I was going to ASEP and SAEM and CORD, and every time there was a CORD conference I would go. I was traveling all over the place. I was trying to do other lectures, trying to build my career. And deep down inside, I had this sense that maybe I was doing a little bit too much travel. I wasn't spending as many nights eating dinner at home as I really should have. But you know, this is my job. I've got to do it. I've got to build my career. I'm flying all over the place. And when my son was about 3 years old, I remember getting home, probably from SAM. I got home, and it was around 9 o'clock at night. And I figured, well, he's probably just drifting off to sleep. So I came in the house, and I dropped my bags in the foyer. And I thought, well, maybe I'll catch him before he falls asleep. And I ran up to his room. And he was in bed already. He was slowly drifting off to sleep. And I sat down next to him. And I leaned over and I whispered those words into his ear that I always do. I said, good night, dream of great things. Your destiny is to save the world. And through these groggy eyes, he looked up at me and he said, no, Daddy, your destiny is to save the world. My destiny is to save you. And then he just kind of drifted off to sleep. And I sat there struck square between the eyes with what he had just told me. And at that moment, I truly realized that I was really screwing things up. And that was a life lesson to me that I really need to start finding more balance in my life. Now, I give that story to the residents also, and it could just as well be that when I give the lecture to them I could just say, you've got to find balance in your life. It's really important to find balance in your life. But the story is something that every resident remembers, and it really hits home and emphasizes the importance. And it's relatable because every one of them who's got a kid can absolutely relate to that story. It's a much better way of emphasizing key points. When you tell your stories, don't use slides. Imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. had put a picture of the Red Hills of Georgia on a slide. It wouldn't have worked that well. But everybody imagines the Red Hills and the Stone Mountains of Tennessee and the snow-capped mountains of Colorado. And your memories of those images are going to be so much more impressive. Even right now, every one of you, I'm sure, just thought about this picture in your mind of these Colorado Rockies. And every one of you has this picture in your mind of Lookout Mountain in Tennessee, all right? And maybe you've never been there before, but I'll bet you one thing. If I'd shown a picture of those things, and then a month from now asked you about that picture, you probably wouldn't remember it. But a month from now, if I ask you about those Red Hills, the picture in your mind right now is the same picture that's going to come back. It's much more memorable when you come up with the image on your own. So when you tell these stories, don't put pictures up of your stories. Let people imagine it. Let them work for it. And they'll remember things so much better. Again, stories is a great way of getting people to wake up as well. And also, if you can find a way of eliciting emotion, again, it causes the limbic system to wake up, and it increases your long-term memory of what you're talking about. Try to find a way of incorporating emotion. And again, it's so much more effective of a way of making a point. I'll finish up with one final story. This is a story that I usually tell at graduation. You're doing a graduation talk. I was asked to give a graduation talk for our residents and for us some other EM grads a number of years ago, and it was in the middle of COVID, and it was in the middle of boarding, and it was in the middle of, you all remember how difficult the times were. And one of the points that I wanted to make to everybody was that we can get through this if we stick together. We can get through this if we work together. No matter how tough the times are, if you work together and share things, you're going to be able to get through it. That's a nice message, you know. It's like, you know, diet and exercise. It's, you know, it's good stuff. Everyone knows that. But I remembered a story about a monk that I talked to the residents about. There was a monk who decided he wanted to see what heaven and hell were like. So first he decided to go and visit hell. And hell wasn't anything at all like what he thought. There were no fires and brimstones and infernos and screams and yells. Instead, hell looked at pretty nice, actually. There was great big banquet halls, chandeliers, feasts of succulent food, but the people in hell were all starving and haggard. And you realize that the reason they were starving and haggard was because they were all forced to eat using 6-foot-long utensils. And so no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't pick up the food and bring it to their own mouth. So they were condemned to live for all of eternity, surrounded by this incredible food, but unable to eat it. Then he went to visit heaven, and he was equally stunned to discover that heaven looked just like hell. Great big banquet halls, feasts of succulent food, chandeliers, 6-foot-long utensils, but the people in heaven were all happy and well-fed. And he discovered that the difference between heaven and hell wasn't the surroundings or the resources. The difference between heaven and hell was people's behavior. You see, in heaven, people sat at tables across from each other, and they used those 6-foot-long utensils to feed each other. And so everybody was happy and well-fed. So if you're willing to work with other people, we can get through this. We can get through COVID or whatever other pandemic comes through, or boarding. No matter what disasters you face, if you're willing to work with your future colleagues, you're going to get through it. And to this day, people still remember that story better than just about anything else I've ever taught them. The story really, really solidifies the message. So again, 2 key points as I finish up. Stories are magical. They're a part of being human. They help with bonding. They bond you with the audience, and the audience is always going to believe you more if they bond with you. And number 2, they will increase the power of your message and the memory of your message as well. So if you can find a way of incorporating stories into your presentations, it's going to make all the difference in the world. All right? Christina, back to you.
Thank you. Well, I'm not going to try to follow that. So why don't we take a 5-minute break? There are restrooms just down the hall. Please come back in 5 minutes so we can stay on time. Thank you.
Outside of Boise is where so for this guy, it's just to click on and then okay, perfect. You can take it. Yeah, I might probably. Yes, she'll start next. Yeah, I love listening. Thank you. I know. It's like my weakness, so. For the ancient. Yeah, I got the metaphor. I know. And it's perfect. I have them. Oh, nice. Yeah, actually, I had some sort of. Oh, you did.
It's hard to get, do CME, so all the digests
Particularly their PowerPoint and my tool. Yeah,
So I've been listening to him forever. Okay. Yeah, I've heard so many good things about him.
Because I know Colin Murray really well. She was at Washington before I was there.
Oh, so you're watching.
Like,
You were sitting with the Arizona.
yeah. Halsey was my senior resident when I was an intern. Like one of my favorite humans, and so they all have good places. And then, so I'm at Washington. I'm still at Washington. I just it's been a fun career. I didn't even put it together because I don't think I know what to do. This sounds like, and then. I guess that's what you were describing. And you have to, I haven't seen many of them in Australia here. I saw them both at Cool. Yeah. To see them school.
Thanks, Erin.
I'll have to, so you have no lectures where you're at?
For medical school, correct.
Yes, yeah.
We
Interesting.
just redid the curriculum. Hey, folks
checking
are just
batteries.
on break. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We're good. We just redid the curriculum and went from almost completely lecture to lecture free for the medical students.
You know, it's interesting because we're doing traditional lectures, and when you try to do things like flip classroom or
Yeah.
things like that, the problem is nobody comes ever.
We have mandatory attendance 5 days a week.
Yeah, see, we started off with mandatory attendance, then we got a different dean, we went
Yeah.
to
You have
non-mandatory.
to have a strong team.
And that's the thing, you know, we've talked about this, I talked about with our colleagues, and I said, okay, if we do a flipped classroom and you have 20 students, what do you do with that?
Yeah, you can't get it. You have to have mandatory attendance.
Okay,
And,
okay, that was gonna be my question.
Yeah, because we invest heavily in small group learning. So we have, 50, I have 50 faculty who do lead small groups twice a week, and they're all supported at 20%. So they have to be supported, they have to have the time and space, and the students have to come.
Okay, so we do like some things we do mandatory, certain events, you know, like I teach bedside ultrasound, ultrasound, so that's all mandatory. Those hands-on
Those things are
events,
hands-on, yes.
hands-on,
Like
and
anatomy.
and the clinical medicine stuff, but you know, I'll do some simulation stuff, mannequins and rhythms and things like that, and that's all mandatory.
Yeah. We also cut down the hours when we moved to it being mandatory. So before there were more hours in a day of lecture and stuff, but now it's fewer hours, but they're required.
And then do you deliver some stuff just in recordings?
Nothing in
asynchronous or not?
recordings, but they have assigned reading every day.
Sounds really okay. I know how to present the material. And then when my son was a medical student, it was at the same time as I started teaching. He started medical school at a different medical school.
Yeah.
So I'd always compare things with him.
Yeah.
You have a test case.
Yeah.
Say, what do you think of this?
Oh, and then I would send him test questions.
Yeah.
Hey, look at these with your roommates and see if these will fly.
That's funny.
Yeah. So we,
Captive audience, I guess.
yeah. Yeah. So
It is so cold in here still.
It is
I'm
freezing in here.
shivering.
I know.
it's keeping me awake.
I was gonna say, I don't know what like the
I guess if it
balance
were warm,
is.
it would be.
And it's nothing to do with you guys. I've been up since 4 o'clock in the
Oh,
morning
wow.
to get on the plane, but
Yeah, where are you traveling from?
travel for my job.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Otherwise, it'll scratch your
Okay.
speaker. Thingy.
Pro tips.
And you may want to put it actually on your shirt rather than the vest. Okay. Because that way it's more light. Otherwise,
Here?
when you turn, yeah,
Side by side.
yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, when you turn your head.
That's a good point. I didn't think about what I was wearing, which was a rookie mistake. But
Well, at
this
least you
isn't
have a
too bad.
skirt, because I
Yeah,
wore a
I've done
dress
that
with a
before.
belt, because otherwise you get there,
Yeah.
and you're like, I have this beautiful dress on,
Yeah.
and they have to hook it
There's
to the
nowhere.
back of
Actually, I
your
was
neck.
gonna wear a dress, so I just went through this. Okay, and this is the clicker?
Yep.
Is that right? Okay. Perfect. Don't want to drink ice water, but
Nothing on your plate, right?
okay, so we'll have from. I guess you should put it down. That's what. Did he put his phone up there? Was that his phone or your phone? That was smart.
This is mine. I think that was his.
His. That was smart.
Yeah. We're a little behind, but,
Well, I don't think so.
well, I guess
Supposed to be
not.
at break right now?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I'm sorry if you sent me the email, I missed it. Are you sharing your screen?
I guess we can.
I'm not sure what
I'm
SAM's.
not sure what SAM does.
I believe since you're attending, it should
But
probably
we
be
could,
okay.
I have the email list, so we could just email out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we should be allowed to. We might just need to ask.
Oh, I think we can, as long as it's okay with
Okay.
us. Yeah.
Okay.
We can, if that'd
That's
be
fine
helpful.
with me.
That was a long discussion to say, I think that's fine with
Alright.
us, yeah.
I just SAM's a little more picky about things, so I don't know.
But I don't think they can
police that.
not let us.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
I just can't remember.
There's just so many. I agree with that because there's so many good things you're bringing up, and I'm like glad I have access to it, so I can go
Yeah.
back and focus on the content that.
Yeah,
You know,
and
that really
hopefully the
resonated.
handouts people can jot
Yeah,
notes
no, I
too.
mean it's just that fear of not remembering one of these salient
Yeah.
points, you know. Just so cool in here. No,
I feel like
Never
shaking,
are.
not because I'm nervous though.
no, I know.
Physically cold.
I do that though. I think it's one of those like preparing for talking for me, because I'll get cheeky, but it's like more of like the. You talked about like ramping up before you talk, and I think that's something that happens to me. Even independent of feeling nervous.
Yeah.
All right, I'll take a couple pictures of you. Please do. This lighting is like not.
Yeah, the lighting is always bad. Every single picture of me speaking at conferences, I'm making a weird face. Every
Okay,
single
we'll get
time.
Some that's not a weird picture.
Maybe I'll
Is
like
it just
pause.
like a
It's just
self-critical thing?
no, it's just when I'm speaking, I'm very expressive, and so then it'll be you know a weird grimace looking kind of
I think
expression.
everyone feels that way. But yeah.
Yeah, we probably should rally the troops. Oh, I said 5 minutes, but I don't know exactly what. Are they just hanging out outside?
They're just hanging out.
Keeping warm.
No, there's this. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I've got copies.
Oh, great.
I mean, we're doing well. No, we're not. Wait, we're 2:44.
Yeah, we were really to break. But I mean, well, you're gonna combine.
I was
That's
gonna
true.
this part.
If you, I know you had, and this is totally up to you. I know you had a bunch of examples. Depending on how long it'll. I'm also gonna put some similar.
Yeah, let's get people back in so we can get going.
I can go bring them.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
thought about that literally like the whole time after I signed up. I was like, yeah.
Welcome back. So that was a great session from Amal and a great example of storytelling and the importance of emotion to memory. One of my good friends was a grad student when I was in grad school, and she was studying the effects of emotion on memory. And she told me a story about how back in the Middle Ages, before there was email, and you had to rely on somebody's memory to relay a story. And they would have somebody, let me pick on you, tell me your name. Zach, okay. So if Zach is gonna go, walk several miles or a day and relay a memory, he's gotta relay a message, he has to remember it. So what they would do is I would tell Zach the message and then slap him on the face. And that would cause an emotional response that would help him remember the message. So I encourage you to liberally slap your participants to help them retain the memories of the material. Yeah, don't come at me with your HR folks. So we've talked about our audience, our basic message, communication strategies. Now let's think about design. Not all talks need to be a PowerPoint. PowerPoint is a tool, just like storytelling, delivery, questions, breakouts are tools. But it's one that we will typically want to be able to use well. But rather than saying, well, here's the rules of PowerPoint, you can only have no more than 14.7 words per slide. And each font must be greater than 20. Well, as soon as somebody gives me a rule, I don't know about you, but I want to break it. So instead, I'm going to give you some principles from cognitive load theory to think about slide design. And then Sarah will go into more advanced details of slide design. We learn in folders. Our brains like folders. If I ask a PGY3, how would you treat hyperkalemia of 8? They will say calcium, insulin, glucose, bicarb, albuterol, dialysis. It's all in that same folder for them. Whereas if you ask a novice learner, say a medical student, how would you treat hyperkalemia? They may have some of the information, but it's more disorganized. It's, maybe they know calcium's good, maybe they know dialysis, but they don't have it all right there in their folders. So when we teach, we can help our learners learn better if we give them the information in folders, in an organized way. And cognitive load theory is what can help us think about how we do that. It breaks up the information that you are teaching into intrinsic and extrinsic load. So I'm going to give you the framework, and then we're going to use some practical examples. The intrinsic load is the actual content of the information being taught. Extrinsic load has two components. One is the generative load. This is the work here that the learner has to do to slot that information or organize it into their mental schema. So maybe they have a folder for hyperkalemia. I give you a new piece of information like, oh, there's this new Lokelma for treating hyperkalemia. You as the listener have to do some work to put that into your mental schema. That's the generative load. The extraneous load is everything else that might be going on. The noise in the room, people's cell phones beeping, people clapping next door right on cue. All the other things, or distracting elements of design in your slide. That can cause extraneous load. And the idea is that our brains can only handle a certain amount of cognitive load, and we're not supercomputers. So if we have too much extraneous load, we can't formulate as much of the new material, or we can't integrate as much of the new material. So how can we manage the intrinsic load? The biggest problem is trying to teach too much. I'm going to teach you, I've got 30 minutes to teach you everything I know about diabetes and the thyroid. So avoiding an excessive amount of content, allowing them time to process. And you can do that by breaking it up into smaller pieces and really being diligent or disciplined about not trying to teach too much. One of the things Corey Slovis says, and if you haven't heard him speak, he's a great speaker, is teach less better. Teach less better. The second component here of cognitive load theory is the generative load. This is the work the learner has to do to integrate the information into their mental schema. How can you help them? Well, it requires learner motivation. So you need to tie it into their WIFM. Why do they care about this? Show them. You can give them an explicit organization or framework. We're not just going to talk about hyperkalemia, we're going to talk about mild, moderate, severe. Not just going to talk about neck trauma, we'll talk about the 3 zones of the neck and how you treat them differently. So give them a schema, a framework, pictures, graphs, charts. Use conversational speech. If you are using a lot of jargon, a lot of words, sentences that are 35 paragraphs long, they're going to have a tough time following. So using conversational tone and speech can help. Also integrating what they already know. Last week we talked about DKA. Now I'm going to compare and contrast DKA and HHNK. Makes it easier for them to slot it into their mental folders. And then extraneous load, we want to minimize this as much as possible. Anything that is noisy on your slides, that's not contributing on your slides, noise outside the room, I always shut the door, I have people silence their phones. And then also being aware of the emotional extraneous load. If you're making it not a safe environment, if you're asking people, remember the yelling guy from earlier? If you're causing that fight or flight response in people, you're creating an emotional extraneous load. So as you are looking through your slide design, and I'm going to show you an example, and I want you to tell me how, using the principles of cognitive load theory, we could improve this slide design. So remember, intrinsic load, this is the content being taught. Generative load, this is how you organize it into schema or frameworks. And extraneous load is anything extra that is not contributing to learning. So let's apply it to our lectures. I'm going to skip just a couple things because I want to make sure that we have more time for discussion. Now, in EM specifically, PowerPoint was great when it first came out. Like Amal said, you could just put all the text up on the screen, you could stand there and read it. It was fantastic. And now there's been a swing of the pendulum to more all pictures, which can work for some people and some types of talks. Like your TED Talk, you might only have pictures, if anything at all. But to me, I think there's a better happy medium somewhere. Sometimes if you, heaven forbid, zone out and you look back up at the screen and all you see is a hippopotamus, you don't remember what does a hippopotamus relate to what I'm teaching if there's no other text or no other clues on the screen to what I'm talking about. So to me, I think a happy medium somewhere in between. Now, should we ban the bullet point? Well, let's take a look at this. How does this feel in bullet format? Right? I mean, it's parsed correctly. The bullet indents are, done well. But it's really not helping out this speech at all. Now, what about this? This is a content-heavy topic. What's the problem with this from cognitive load theory? Too much, immediately, just too much. And there's no kind of organizing framework. So one other framework that I want to give you, and this is going to look like a lot, but I'm going to rein it in a second, but so that you can be familiar, is called Meyer's Principles of Multimedia Design. And this guy Meyer brought a lot of research from a lot of different places and put it together into these 12 principles. And I've color-coded them here with green is the intrinsic load, gray is the generative load, and red is extraneous load. But I'm going to focus only on 7 of them here. And I copied them verbatim from his work, but now I'm going to paraphrase them to make them easier to follow. Our principles of multimedia learning and design are: we learn better when we know the names of concepts ahead of time. We learn better when there are cues to the organization of the material. That's a generative load, mild, moderate, severe. We learn better when words are conversational rather than formal. We learn better with words and pictures than just words or just pictures alone. And we learn better when words and pictures are presented together. If they go together, put them together. We learn better when they are near each other and when anything extraneous is excluded. So let me show you an example of an actual unfortunate death by PowerPoint. This was 22 years of the Columbia Air shuttle, that had been in operation for 22 years. And it was taking off in 2003, and a little chunk of foam broke off and hit the outside of the space shuttle. And so it was already on its way up to space. And the team on the ground had to decide, what do we do with this little chunk of foam here that had broken off and hit the outside of the shuttle? And they could, have the people just come back on the shuttle. They could send another shuttle up to the space station to rescue them, or they could try to have them go out and repair it. And those were their options. And so the team of engineers on the ground reviewed some of the data, and this was one of the slides that they presented. Take a look at that and tell me, what should the team do? Should they go fix it? Should they send a rescue mission? Or should they come back as is? Anyone know? No. Okay, so using cognitive load theory, what are some problems with this? You stopped reading it? It's very dense. Too techy? Yeah, we don't know. So actually, the words, the Sophie is that foam tile that broke off, but then they also call it something else on here. They use several different terms for it.
I'm not sure if the actual point is there.
What is their actual take-home point? What is the bottom line?
It doesn't have the humanity of the risks.
Yeah, it doesn't really bring out the risks. And the key point was that the foam, as it hit at 9 times the speed of a bullet, and that speed was outside of their test data. That's the key point. So they didn't know, because they hadn't really tested it at that velocity, what would happen. And unfortunately, they ended up saying, yep, just come on and fly back, and it burned up, overheated, and killed the 7 astronauts. Now, hopefully none of our PowerPoint failures would be that dramatic, but we are presenting important things. And so we owe it to our learners and to our future patients to do a good job of it. So my slide design principles here are find a style that works for you. You may like my style, you may like Sarah's style. Find a style that works for you. Use videos and sound judiciously. Find high quality images, anticipate problems, and avoid overly busy slides or too much just stuff in your slides. My MO is to have some content on the screen, usually a picture or a graph and some text, and then the bulk of what's going on is the verbal content. Simplicity is about subtracting the obvious and adding the meaningful. It's the achievement of maximum effect with minimum means. I like to think about having a KonMari approach to your slides. If any of you read that book, the life-changing magic of tidying up? I haven't read the book, but her premise is you go declutter your house by putting everything in a pile, pick up each item and say, does this spark joy? And if it doesn't, then you thank it for its service and you send it on its way. Now, you can do the same thing with your slides. Pick apart each slide, each part of your slide. Do I need this? And if you don't delete it. I never delete slides. I move them to the bottom, to the attic, move them out, so that they are not cluttering up your space. So I do want to do a few examples here, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah, of PowerPoint Extreme Makeover Edition. And I want you to tell me, using intrinsic load, generative load, extraneous load, how we could redesign these slides using those principles. So this was that first one. How could you identified there's too much intrinsic load, there's no framework, it's just a bunch of quotes. How could you redesign this one? Yeah, cut the references or maybe put them down in the corner really small. Make it 2 slides, yeah. If it's too much information, split it up. A picture. What's the take-home point? Yeah, so for example, we could pull out just this one quote that's focusing on malpractice and say, here, this is the take-home point. Or we could focus on just the risks and benefits. But we can't have all of it in one slide. Okay, what about this one? Gunshots, some statistics. What's wrong with this one? Too many statistics? Yeah. The years overlap. Yeah, it's like pseudo chronological, but not really. Should be 3 or 4 slides. Is that what you said? Yes. No context, no generative framework. Yes. So how could you redesign this? Put key points on a timeline. Oh, a graph. Yes. Good. Picture of a gun. I did that once. Somebody told me it was triggering. It's a true story, though. So we could do several things. We could pull out just this, that men are seen for gunshot wounds 7 times more than women. But what about this title, Gunshot Injuries, Some Statistics? That doesn't really clue you into what I'm saying. What if we put our bottom line up front? The take-home point is men are seen for gunshot wounds 7 times more than women. Now watch this title. Watch how readable is this one versus this one. We're at the optometrist. What do you like better, version A or version B? Now the nice thing is you can do studies on this. You can have people read things and see how much they retain. We actually retain it better if you use the lowercase. So you'll see all my titles have only an uppercase for the first word and everything else is lowercase. So bottom line up front with first word only capitalized. Or let's say we wanted to pull this item out. Somebody wanted a graph, firearm injuries in over 30,000 patients by intention. What do you think of this one? This is better, right? How could we make it even better? Larger legend. Yep, too small. Colors are too similar. Good pickup.
You really need a breakdown of any categories that are not.
Yeah, the categories that are too small. And then what's my take-home point here? What's my bottom line? Suicide's the leading one, yeah. Or this was actually my bottom line, is that suicide and homicide account for 95% of gunshot wounds. So I put my bottom line up front. Now look at the data in a pie chart versus a bar chart? Which one helps you out more? You like the pie chart? Bar chart? So we can actually differentiate numbers or quantities better in a bar chart than a pie chart. Pie charts can be useful for some visualizations, but for actually seeing how much the quantity in each category, bar charts are better. So our bottom line up front and good data. Somebody else wanted a graph. All right, how's this graph for you? What do you want?
The scale is.
Some axes? There you go, axes. How's that?
I mean, we don't need the individual year data points on each line.
True, yeah.
They don't, I mean, you could overlay them like that. It's hard to they're not overlaid.
What else do you want? Too complicated? Yeah. Titles on the axis. Oh, so needy. Okay, how about this? So better, right? We've got axis titles. We have a title here. We're looking at homicides by different weapon type. And then maybe I want to put an arrow here to say, what happened in 1995 that led to that decrease in homicides by gunshot? That's interesting. Now you're engaged. Now you want to hear. I don't know the answer. Look it up in the break and tell me later. All right, what about this? Hyperkalemia. Here, you guys, you can all see that there are peak T waves in hyperkalemia. Wait a second, but it shows up fine on my screen. No, it doesn't matter. It's not showing up well there. What do you want to do for this? Use the space better, so spread it out, fix the contrast, and put a title, Hyperkalemia causes peaked T waves. And if you're a junior learner, you might not know what a T wave is. So I'm going to circle these to show you these are the peaked T waves that I'm talking about. What about this one? Fix my slide. This is an M&M. Yeah, make it larger and put it on a black background. Any chest x-rays, CTs, ultrasound, put it on a black background. See how much better that shows up. What about this? Okay, guys, thanks for coming to faculty meeting. We're rolling out a new chest pain pathway. It goes live tomorrow. Okay, here it is. Any questions? Okay, next item. You laugh because it's true.
So true.
What could we do here? Put it in a handout? Yeah. Or an email? Did this meeting have to be an email? Could this meeting have been an email? Could this meeting have been a fist fight? Highlight the changes. Okay, good. A little better. Maybe blow those up. But then when you blow it up, it gets grainy. So really, you'd have to remake it yourself, is what I would do here. What's wrong with this slide? This is called lack of spatial contiguity. Your eyes don't know where to go and where to follow things. So for example, here, what could we do to make this better? Put the titles with the items that they refer to. This is what Meyer's principle of spatial contiguity was. Put the things that go together in time, and together in space, so that if I'm speaking about it, it comes up, and the pictures and the words are all in the same place. Be careful with bad fonts and colors. This is another one where people say, oh, it shows up great on my computer screen. Well, great. Doesn't show up well for us. There's lots of great fun things you could do with fonts that I would recommend you don't do with fonts. Or fancy moving GIFs. If it is adding something for you, great. If it is not, where does it fall in our cognitive load? Extraneous. This is not like this little falling man GIF, or clip art, this little moving gears GIF, really is not adding anything to your learning. This is extraneous load. Or as soon as you put up a moving thing, people's eyes go to it. And you're thinking, oh, puppy, I miss my dog. And you're no longer listening to anything that I'm saying. Be cautious. Humor can be great. Be cautious if it's too unrelated. Then people start thinking, oh, I get it, Batmobile. I haven't seen the most recent Batman movie. I wonder if there's one out in the theaters. And now your brain is going down this side quest thinking about Batman. Be cautious with jokes or references that not everyone will get. There's a lot of movies. I didn't grow up in the US. There's a lot of movies and references that I just don't get, especially if it relates to sports ball. And so when people make sports ball references, I just don't get it. And so then I feel a little bit alienated. Here's a real slide that I saw in a presentation. The presentation itself was great, but what do you think about this slide? What is it doing for you mentally? Yeah, I had a lot of cognitive dissonance because we're talking about tubing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a tube, but that's not the right kind of tube, and it just created a lot of cognitive dissonance for me. So how to get started creating great slides? Think communication, not decoration. My process is first I make ugly slides, like ugly slides with great content. I pull all my references in, I'll put tons and tons of text in a slide, and then I'll split and organize it. So all those slides that you said, all right, how do I make this better? Split it up and figure out what is the logical sequence in which to present these. And then you can think about how do I relate it to the audience? How do I make the generative load easier? Is there a graph? Is there an image? Is there a picture? And then you can worry about making them interesting with animations or transitions or whatever you want to do. So for example, here's a slide. What would you do with this one? Most of my talks are on geriatrics because that's my subspecialty. What would you do here? In the green sweater. What would you do? Is green? Olive?
My first thought is it almost looks ready for the presses for me, but now that I've watched enough of these lectures that you've given, I would take some of the stats and probably try to put it into some type of graph or chart.
Yeah, nice.
Like a pie chart would be better than that. It doesn't have the bottom line up front kind of approach.
Good.
Which I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a little bit too much information.
Too much information. Excellent. See, look, let's do that. So let's split it up. Let's first take this part, older adults. Well, okay, that title still isn't really giving me all that much info. So let's switch it here to what is an older adult. Older adults are age 65 and older. And why does this matter? Well, just like kids are not just little adults, older adults are not just young people with more gray hair. That's the point. We need to think about them differently. And then I can take this other half of those stats and put it in a pie chart. Now here's actually a place where I think a pie chart does do a good job because I can show the change in, this is just showing when you go from less acute to more acute care, older patients take up more of the high acuity care. So that's how I would redesign those. What about this one? Yeah, a graph. I could show a graph with the sensitivity. Yep. I could put pictures of, a fracture on a rib or an ultrasound. What I ended up doing was kind of a pseudo graph of here's where these different things line up, with a chest x-ray being the gold standard. What about this one? These are causes of traumatic brain injury. What do you want? A picture, yeah. And what's my bottom line? Good, falls. So let me put my bottom line up front. Falls are the leading cause of traumatic brain injury in older patients. And what about this pie chart? What do you think? The colors are too similar. What else? What about the spatial contiguity here?
You have to interpret.
Yeah.
Just simply put
Excellent. So if I want to know what is this, tiny little greenish segment, then I have to look over here and over here. So I could put them together. That's better, right? But what do you think about this versus this one? See the difference there? How your brain can just differentiate so much better with a bar chart. A few other ideas, if you are mostly putting a picture, whatever the picture is, go ahead and make it big. Make it as big as you can. That white space over here is not really helping you out. If you want to put some text and you can put it over the picture, you can overlay it and put a semi-transparent background. So anyone can add more. It takes discipline of mind and strength of will to make the hard choices about what to include and what to exclude. So I will turn it over now to Sarah, who will take you through some more advanced slide design ideas. And then you're going to design a slide together in your groups.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Is this on? these are some really bad slides. Bad colors, too many data points. This is a very common thing in medical slides. I think that if you go around SAEM and you look at the presentations, you'll see that a lot of the slide design is very bad. So I apologize in advance. You might be going to every lecture and saying, oh my gosh, I can't look at this. And that's our fault, so sorry. Again, too much text. So sometimes you feel like, where's Waldo? And I think that Dr. Matu did a great job of talking about, what's the point? What do you want your learners to take away? This should ideally be active. So thinking first about your intention, your purpose, and it gives you great feedback as a lecturer when you engage your audience and you know, okay, like what do they know from what I'm saying? So I could not agree more with the materials that have been covered already. And I do have a worksheet if you guys want to take a peek that will kind of cover all the topic and give you lots of ideas for active learning. The point is not to rely on your PowerPoint. And we'll connect a little bit of the educational theory, which is kind of what Christina talked about, to applied practice in your visual presentation. So secret recipe, this comes mostly from a woman named Nancy Duarte. And a lot of the great stuff in this is actually not in medicine. Shocker, right? None of us are shocked by that. So Nancy Duarte wrote a book called Slideology. And Slideology, I think, is a great primer. You can get it on Amazon to think about how you design your slides. And it comes from a woman who's kind of been doing consulting and business work for many years in this area. So we're going to think about background, colors, text, images, and lastly, engagement. I won't spend a whole lot of time on the last one just because I think that's maybe better spent thinking and brainstorming your groups, but let's first of all cover some of the background. So very basically, right? Like what do you want your background to do? You don't want it to compete with your text, so just keep it simple. You'll notice that good slide design often has a really dark background with light text or light background with dark text. Especially in these big conference centers, you'll often notice that it's really hard to read if you don't make a big enough discrepancy in the colors. And that's based on color design theory, not just something that I'm making up. And there's a lot of good templates out there that you can actually draw upon, so don't recreate the wheel. My favorite one, all of our faculty here know, I love Canva. Canva is a program that has a free trial. I promise I don't get paid, I have no disclosures. I wish I did. And they also have, if you have an EDU email address, you can get a free pro account. It has images, it has style. It's like kind of pressing the easy button on design. So if you're kind of getting started, you're looking for a really easy tool, I would recommend trying Canva. What do you guys think about these designs? They're fine, right? Light background. They have a little bit of a design flair, nothing too competing. Everyone has their own style, so find your style. I'm not saying that my point of view is better than your point of view, but you want to find something that's not going to distract your audience. Keep it simple. All right, colors. So let's talk about colors. So it's the color wheel. You might remember from primary school, right? So let's think about colors. Colors can have a feeling, evoke a feeling. So if I ask you guys about, MTP, what color would you guys make your presentation? What color do you think you would choose as like your theme? I'm really leading you in here. Red. Yes, thank you. Every presentation about blood that I see tends to be red. Red, just so you know, can evoke certain emotions that can be negative, particularly in some cultures. So, you might want to go with something more blue, or maybe you want purple, you want royalty, you want luxury. So this is, in the business world, something that they'll utilize in their advantage. Maybe they don't want to use red. Maybe they'll offend their visiting guests. So think about that. Also think about, I mentioned that the colors don't always show up the same on these larger projectors. So actually, on my screen, these colors were quite similar, but on here it actually showed up better. Typically, it's the opposite. Does that ever happen to anyone in the room where, like, you can't even read your washed out text and you're like, oh no. All right. High contrast colors, better readability. There's something called the 60-30-20 rule. So when I have a faculty member that comes to me and And then maybe your header might want to be a variety of that color, like a different color. And then you might want one more accent color. There's sort of different numbers that people utilize for this. But it's a nice way to think about how to kind of like spice it up a little bit so it's not so monotone. Did anyone do this when they were a child? I think we all had to at some point, the Ishihara test. So what percentage of people do you guys think are colorblind? Like, mostly it tends to be in Caucasian, but about what percentage of men particularly do you guys think have color deficiency? About 8%. So it's very common, particularly men. Recessive traits. Anyone in this room that would want to share? Oh, we got
I
it.
can't see half those.
Is it just because it's fuzzy? Because it is fuzzy.
No, in real life,
Yes.
I can't do it.
Yeah, so this is really common. So it's something to just realize that some of the colors, another reason I tend to avoid red is because often patients, I was working late last night, often people have difficulty, and I always have one in my audience that has difficulty with particularly red green. So I don't really love using red. And if you combine the colors, they might turn out to be really muddy. So one of my favorite games with my residents at my last program was like, hey, like, what do you see on my slide when I do this? And he's like, oh, that looks this color, because he had color deficiency. All right, so here's a couple of my slides just to exemplify the point. I don't want to get into too much so you have time. Let's talk about text. So text is really important. The audience is either going to read your slides or listen. They can't do both, right? This just gets into what Christina was saying earlier. So when I was first starting, and I'm still kind of transitioning, I was kind of like the document person. Is anybody in here a document person where they feel like they have to have it all on the slide, otherwise they're going to miss, right? That's a very common thing when you're first creating a presentation. A secondary design person might go to the teleprompter, where you have your kind of like little nuggets that you can rely on in your crutch. And then you might go to the presentation. And that's really what I hope that all of you guys can get to. If you really want to effectively teach, you want to present enough material that people are really excited and engaged, and they're not sort of just reading your slide. Just more examples. So you might bullet this big block of text. What about bolding it? Or putting a different color to emphasize? I do this all the time. Tell your learners what it is that you want them to know. I want you to know if you're learning how to ride a bike, you're going to put the training wheels, you're going to wobble, you're going to wear protective clothing, grass, and then you're going to go. Right? Maybe this is all I need. Take that big block of text in your PowerPoint and put it to your notes section. I often get the question, hey, Sarah, what do I do? Because I'm going to have learners that can't be there at the session. And I don't want them to miss out on my content. It's like, well, A, they should be there. But B, put it in your notes section so it's still there and you still have that to draw to, but it's not necessarily competing with what you're trying to say. Or maybe do the TED Talk style. Just have a beautiful image. So this is one that I took, traumatic iritis, and I took some images. This is a very typical medical talk. We all agree this is something you might see at a standard lecture. So a couple things I did, right? I did that big blow up the image, and sometimes what I like to do is blow up the image and actually mute down the background. You know how there's sort of a fade feature on PowerPoint or whatever? You can fade the background, and then I just blew it up. We're going to be talking today about traumatic iritis. Let's actually look at what's happening, right? Let's blow up this beautiful image of the eye to see where this is occurring, inflammation, etc. So show them what it is. Give them the tools to learn from you. And then I'm going to cover a few it's not giving away your secret sauce. It's just showing your learners what to focus on. And then another pet peeve of mine, getting her in the background. Does anyone like else get annoyed, or is this just me? The little background. Okay, we've got one. We've got another. Thank you. 2 people at least. So often people have a dark background and this little white icon. So you can actually remove that pretty simply by going to the remove background feature in PowerPoint, and it will automatically get rid of that little white square. I will say if you have Keynote or Mac, it's actually a little bit better at picking up the white, but I use that all the time to kind of declutter my slides and my images. I have on your sheet a bunch of image resources, so I would draw your attention to that as far as where you can find free images and things like that. A few listed here, but you want to make sure if you're giving a talk at a national venue, try not to use stuff that's not labeled for commercial reuse or for non-commercial reuse, depending what it is. It often will say Creative Commons licenses is how it's phrased, because you don't really want people to think you're ripping off their images. And engagement, I'll kind of stop here, but just think about how do you engage your learners during a PowerPoint presentation. So this is very important to me. Any presentation that we're doing in our residency, I would prefer 20, 30 minutes tops. And then we're going to active learning. We're going up that pyramid, right? We're going into active learning, we're going to hands-on, we're doing a workshop. That's what you guys are about to do right now. So let's go ahead and just some examples. I like to do fun games. This was like one terrible night in ED, and every patient came in pregnant. So it was a choose your own adventure. So all of my residents went around and they're like, oh, this is terrible. I'm like, I know, I hate OB. All right, so of course the patients all corrupt and they have to pick things and whatever. So that's a fun way to kind of engage people without, droning on and on. Okay, so putting it all together. So we talked about background, colors, text, images, engagement. I won't go into these, are just some examples that I created of slides. This was this one. So this is a popular thing I like to do, is take an image and just pull out the main points. See how that changes sort of what you're looking at, how much clearer it is? So this is what sets our company apart. All right, so we're going to move into workshop. I know we're good. We're good on time. Perfect. So questions from you guys about slide design, things so far that we can answer? Yes?
How much time do you spend presenting?
It's gotten easier for me personally. I would ask the room, right? We have a whole group of people. I would say for me personally, as far as the design goes, now that I utilize Canva and I'm very equipped to do that, it might take me 2 to 3 hours to kind of get my design what I like it. But that's with like 2 years of a fellowship, kind of devoted on that, and then 3.5 years as faculty, and a few more years as faculty. So, yeah.
One thing that has been life-changing for me from a design perspective is I have the same color scheme, I have one font for my titles, the same PowerPoint template for all my talks. And you can go into, and we can show you if you want, the slide master, and then you can change the header for the whole template for your whole PowerPoint. So all my talks have the same color scheme, same font, same format, so that then I can mix and match. Or if you want a 30-minute talk on something with 20 minutes on something else, all my talks would merge seamlessly together. And that's been life-changing.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And I'd argue it doesn't need to take a long time. Just pick something that maybe is your style, your aesthetic, that you can kind of have and go to. It doesn't take long to change the header font or a background color. That's kind of all that you're going for. Other questions, please?
One thing, I used to use a dark background with the light color, and then the students complained about it because they like a white background, because then they say they can do notes easier on PDF. So I don't know if anybody's had that experience.
Yes, I've heard of that. Students have complained about, well, it's not on the slide, so I say to put the note section. But I do think from a note-taking perspective, that makes sense to me, right? That they can't write on your slides, and if that's what they're doing. So you have to think about your audience and how they're receiving the slides, of course, and depending on the format you're giving the talk in. But that's a good point.
Or if you print it, don't want it to be over some important piece of information. So it does start to make you look at, I'm going to leave the upper corner or the bottom somewhere that my face and speaking body part can be, so that it's not, because people get pissed when they think they're missing something. That's why, like, you can have crap up on your slides, but if I'm in the back of the room and I can't read it, I am now like, what? Those guys all know and I don't. And so anytime you're hiding or crossing over or blocking something, it irritates people, and then they start to get irritated at you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, there's an abstract at SAEM that compared the talking head versus no talking head on learning retention, and the one with the talking head did much better. So I was really excited to see that work of literature, and I'm going to go congratulate the author for doing that study. But there is some evidence that sort of says that that's a good thing to have because people see human beings talking. All right, so let's break. We'll float around and hopefully have more tips for you guys. So the goal is that we may not have time for everything. If you guys want to pick one slide, that's why you have your laptops, open up your laptops. So a title slide or a content slide from something you're working on. I'm sure we all have content we're working on, and just sort of work on updating it, implementing a couple of the techniques that we discussed today. And for this, I would work in pairs rather than as a whole table so that you can really see each other's computer and get into it. So we'll take like... well, we had, I'm just on now. We had an hour scheduled total, but, oh yeah, we're still doing pretty good.
Take.
So we have until 4. Is that enough time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Take like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
To design your slides. Try to get 2 slides done at least.
So they'll basically log in. I haven't done this way before. They'll log in.
Because you'll love this.
That's so smart.
So I'm logged into the Zoom here. They can log in and then just share screen.
Okay, guys. I know this isn't nearly enough time, so shameless plug for the ASAP Teaching Fellowship, where we do like a whole day on this topic. So if you want to kind of have more time to work. So Christina had the brilliant idea that basically she created a Zoom link. So if anyone would be brave enough to maybe share a slide that you're working on or you maybe want feedback on, you can actually go to the link and share your screen and show everybody.
So just go to tinyurl.com/shenvzoom, and then I will let you in the room, and you can screen share your slide.
And don't be shy. Any volunteers? Otherwise I have. Oh, got somebody. All right, what was your name? Andrew. Okay, Andrew's a brave soul.
But anybody else get queued up, join the Zoom, and that way you can share your slide.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
All right, I let you in, Andrew. You got the Zoom link here. I'm going to minimize it. tinyurl.com/shenvzoom. And you can pop this over here. You can share your screen.
There he is.
That's beautiful, Roanoke.
Love it.
And then Jody, you'll be up next.
So this is a lecture that I gave at Lions 2 years ago at SAEM that I'm converting into a kind of more of a grand rounds talk about syncope management. And so this is kind of my intro page where we define syncope as a transient loss of consciousness with return to spontaneous function. And then I get into kind of the emergency management and why that matters. And then I talk about costs a little bit. But this is kind of, I need to take all of the facts because this was a 5 to 10 minute Lion's Den presentation and then modify a bunch of the other slides, which I will show you, which are horrendous. So.
Small point here, any words that he could take out. Remember, we're going to KonMari, take out anything extraneous.
I always take out any thes, ands, the estimated.
Yeah, estimated at.
Get it down to 1 or 2 words.
Okay. Cool.
All cause syncope costs : 2.4 billion, or 2.4 B.
Okay. Cool. All right.
Maybe, I know you're a good recipient of all of this feedback, right? But the syncope, we talked about title. So I think the title, was it just...
That's actually page 2.
Got it.
I don't have a title yet.
Okay, well, there you go. You'll be inspired.
Syncope
today.
with a lethal twist. Killer syncope.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find, I can't get this one to switch over. No, it doesn't want to do it. I'm not a Zoom.
Oh, you're good. I think if you hit...
Stop share.
Yeah.
Oh, are you trying to stop share?
Yeah, if you hit new share, you should be able to
okay,
pick your new screen. There you go.
All right, and then so what I need to do is take this just horrendous presentation and mix it in. So this is what it all came from. You can see all of the text, all of the but yeah, that's what I'm working on. Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you for being
so much
brave.
for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, where are we going next? I think we had another.
Jody? The little up arrow at the bottom.
I think here. Yep, just click on it. There you go.
So this was a CME talk that I gave that I'm trying to change not too long ago. So this was my title. And I'm not that creative with coming up with titles. I chat GPT, and they gave me that great title, so I liked that title. And I do mostly ultrasound lectures, so my lectures are mostly pictures and not a lot of words. And so going to my learner, I've got to figure out how to add some of those words back, in all honesty. because like this one is just, it's a video, it's all pictures, and sometimes people, if they can watch the video and they're listening, but I need to figure out how to add words back to some of my slides.
Go back to slide 5. What might make this one better? Slide 5, the screen marker.
Dark background.
Can you click on slide 5 so we can see it bigger?
Yeah.
Thanks.
You could put words to emphasize what you're trying to say with the slide.
So it goes.
So screen marker flips with cardio versus fast. What else?
It's really hard to see those green words from back here.
So one suggestion, like the chest x-ray example I showed you, put a black background for imaging, and it just, for whatever reason, the contrast, your eye can see it better. And yeah, the green might be a little bit hard to see there. So what could she do instead of putting kidney on the kidney?
I don't know if I even really need those words in all
Yeah,
honesty.
maybe you don't. I mean, you could point it out, or you could put the word kidney here and a little arrow.
Yeah, I find that most radiographs or ultrasound folks, they often will have a lot of black background. And I think that's just, it really is a lot easier to see the images in my experience if you have that like big blown up picture. So I would probably, you know, again, the point is here, the screen marker, but I would probably blow up most images to suit the whole screen if possible.
Nice.
Awesome.
Any others you wanted to show?
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Anyone else
All
want
right.
to share their slide
Other
or get
people.
feedback or ideas?
I have a victim over here. Yeah, would you like to share? Anyone else? Or-
You got to join the Zoom.
I know that he's got Jason Wagner for his program director at WashU, who's very into slide design, so.
tinyurl.com/shenvzoom.
Anyone else that wants to
Oh,
share?
sorry, Mike was going to make, yeah, go ahead.
I literally already forgot.
I called, I'm sorry.
Where there's image on one slide, next slide, and then key themes or the key points as another
Is that
slide.
it?
That may be effective.
Can I ask a question? Because it came up in ours. What happens when you have like those CME ones and they have specific slides that you need to use? Like how do you figure like making that black background is great, but that's not the slide set that they give you?
I 100% disregard the slide sets that they give me, and I will not use slide sets that people give me because that's limiting my creative freedom. I mean, that's my like slightly snarky answer, but yeah, I don't use slide backgrounds.
I have
from
a
other people.
recommendation for that because that comes up a lot in our slide design. So I call them bumper slides. So maybe put like a first and last slide of the design that they want, and then the rest do the way you want. That's my recommendations. I've never gotten in trouble personally, but you know, yeah, go ahead.
Was that what you say, like with the SAEM, that like every slide has SAEM 24 in the lower right-hand corner that makes designing around very challenging in terms of balancing, that you would just.
Maybe we should go to SAM and tell them that.
I mean, I was just looking at that with one of my,
The
how
problem
everything
is
is.
it makes it hard then to reuse them because you're now dating yourself.
I can show you how to get rid of that though, but let's let Ryan show his slide.
So Sarah's actually seen this one before because this was from the teaching fellowship where we did have a whole day. This was just like a quick peritonsal or abscess drainage, so kind of a more simplistic start. Just a brief thing on the agenda. So I did the CT scan. I didn't put in ultrasound yet, but here's like a CAT scan, and then you wave to this one, and it's kind of, well, you see my markers off, but it should show, like you can measure distance and that kind of stuff from the front. This is still a work in progress, obviously, but like here's like the equipment. There's some animations that we were playing around with. Kind of talk about like the different stuff you need and how to grab it, grab all your stuff. I like this little technique where you like take down the tone of each picture and then you can kind of move through them. And then it knows, that way your eye knows where to go.
What do you guys think?
How do you do that on the slide? So it's really easy. So you just, so like on this CAT scan, for example, in Canva, you can click on the image, and then there's like this checkerboard thing.
Yeah.
Just click there, hit transparency.
Yeah, and PowerPoint and Keynote or they all have a similar version. I tend to like to Google if I don't know how do I make my photos more transparent, and that'll usually give you a tip.
Thanks, Ryan. So let me show you just some PowerPoint tricks for that specific question. So I'm going to escape out of the slide presentation, and I'll leave the Zoom here so we can get rid of that. Bye, Ryan. Sorry, it's like driving backwards, trying to get that thing. Okay, so let me answer that question about the SAEM template. I totally agree with having the bumper slides of make the first and last ones what they want, and then the other ones just be whatever you want. Sorry, give me a second. I have to move the PowerPoint over here.
Oh, and Nick had a good example, actually. Nick, do you want to share what you were telling me about the printing for the black background? He had actually a solution for that.
So if you have like dark background and white text and you're concerned about your residents printing it, if you have them, whenever they select to print, choose, its option is the color. Sorry, I can't remember the name. Let me look. Okay.
I think it was just like print black and white.
Yeah, it was output. If they change that to black and white, it will automatically swap the colors and give a white background with black text.
It's a good tip.
Nice. I'm having some weird PowerPoint problems that it will not un-slideshow itself, so I'm just going to show you in here. Okay, so let's say they give you a SAEM template that you don't want to use. You can come over here and go to View, and then go to Master Template. I can't quite read it from here, so somebody tell me where it is.
Slide master, you're on it.
Oh, I'm on it, okay. No.
Oh, it's, I might be able to steer backwards for you.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe.
Oh, Slide Master, yeah, so go one
No,
more.
I can't.
Yeah, it's
Never mind.
ridiculously hard. So slide, okay, maybe we won't be able to do this. I apologize. I thought I might be able to show you, but PowerPoint is now frozen. So give me a second. Let's take a 2-minute break while I unfreeze PowerPoint here.
All right.
Weird. Never had it do that before. I think it's because we have the weird view.
Zoom broke it.
Yeah, I broke it. I did. I'm just going to exit out and then. Okay. Okay, I think we're back online. Bad time for PowerPoint to freeze. Okay, if you want to circle back. So if you come to View and Slide Master, this has your overall slide format. So here is where you can change the font of all your titles, the font of all your text. If there is like an SAEM logo, it will be here. So you could delete it if you wanted to or do whatever you want with it. The other thing that I'll show you is, let's go back to normal view. Let's say they give you a slide that is in their format and you don't want it to then duplicate SAEM on all of your slides. You can open it in their presentation and then copy the slide, the intro slide, and then come to paste, and not just paste normal, but paste keeping source formatting, and that will keep their background and everything that they have in your slides. So if you're ever merging two PowerPoints, that's what you want to do. Otherwise, it's going to merge into the one that you were presenting on. All right, let's jump back in. Thank you, Sarah, for the fantastic review of PowerPoint. And if you haven't before, I encourage you to take a look at Canva. It is a great tool for many things, not just presentations, but also things like making flyers, making handouts, and things like that. All right, PowerPoint has resuscitated itself. All right, we've talked about our audience, basic message, communication, design, and now execution. It's not enough to just have technical knowledge about something. You want to know how to actually communicate it. And I think about this overlap of technical knowledge, having some gravitas, some communication skills, and your killer talk is at the middle of those three things. So who are some people when you say the words executive presence? Somebody who, when they walk in a room, everybody listens to what they say. Who are some people who come to mind? Maybe people you know, politicians, actors. Anyone come to mind? Barack Obama, great one. He was you point with your knuckles, not with your fingers. Point with your knuckles, yeah. Who else? Any drill sergeant? Yeah. When they walk in the room, you pay attention. They probably maybe yelled a little bit too. I don't know. On TV, they always yell a little bit. Okay. Can I borrow? I'm going to come over here. Can I borrow the marker? What are some things that contribute to having presence, having people listen to what you are saying? Posture, eye contact, good. So everyone stand up for a minute. We're going to do an activity here, posture. All right, show me nervous posture. You're giving a talk, show me nervous posture. Okay, now look around at everybody. I got shoulders hunched, I got like arms crossed, like protecting yourself. I got like people biting their nails, shifting their stuff, like not knowing where their pants are supposed to live anymore. Now show me confidence. See how still it got? Everyone's shoulders went back, chins went up, feet were still, we're not shifting, we're not bobbing back and forth. Great, go ahead and sit down. Posture, very important. What else goes into executive presence? Your message. Tell me more about that. Command the audience. It's inspirational. It's credible. It's authentic. What else?
Your appearance.
Appearance. What about your appearance?
Recommend a power brooch.
A power brooch. Oh.
A professional appearance.
I think you've blown my mind. My wardrobe, I'm now going to wear a power brooch, and I'm going to call it a power brooch, and it's going to bring me power like an amulet that resurrects pharaohs. This is brilliant. Okay, appearance / power brooch, yes. What else about appearance? What about it?
Dressing more professionally, like might convey a sense of confidence or, belonging that they're supposed to be,
Yeah.
discussing whatever in front of a group of people rather than if I show up in like a cut-off shirt, I need to wear one.
Yeah, you are credible. People will give you a little bit, for better or worse. We look at people's appearances. I'm not looking at your pancreas. I'm looking at your clothing and your facial expressions. So people are going to judge you for better or worse that way. So looking professional can help you have more credibility, especially in sometimes, I will say, just address this issue as a woman or sometimes other minorities. I've heard from my friends, they say, I have to work even harder to be heard and listened to and taken seriously. So if I'm giving a talk, power brooch notwithstanding, I want to be dressed more formally than anyone else in the room. That's my personal take. Some people are more informal, and depends. If it's your residency talk, maybe you don't need a power brooch, but giving, grand rounds somewhere else, pull that thing out. What else?
Tone.
Tone, say more about tone.
I think your tone can be more confident. How you come across, I think, maybe more confident, maybe in your tone.
Mm-hmm. So what would be some examples of a not confident tone or a not confident way of speaking?
Voice goes up at the end of every sentence.
your voice goes up and you're not really sure of yourself, and every time you say, I think we should order a D-dimer, and this is the p-value of the study, and it's a question, once in a while is okay, but after a while, it starts to get a little annoying. Or you trail off. Self-deprecating comments. Say more about that.
I'm guilty of it. It's just usually...
You just did it.
Yes. If you're the expert in the room, be the expert in the room.
Be the expert.
Do not doubt yourself as...
Yeah. Now, self-deprecating humor can sometimes be okay. You have to be like Amal Matu. Can I tell your joke that you use? Can I use it? Sure. When he gives talks, oftentimes he shows up and you all know who he is already. And he'll say, now I want everyone to take a deep breath and lower your expectations. And that works for him. If you're brand new and nobody knows you, it might not work for you. To walk in as a first-time guest speaker and now everybody lower your expectations, please, it might not work. So use it carefully. The other thing that's related to that is apologies. Never apologize. I mean, unless you accidentally bump into someone or I mark your face with the marker, don't apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't get a chance to really work on my slides. No, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. This doesn't really show up well. Don't apologize. If you need to, if something did go wrong, thank them. Thank you for your patience with getting my PowerPoint glitch reset when PowerPoint froze. But don't apologize. Okay, what else? Presence, confidence, gravitas.
I think preparation, just like already being ready to present right on time, standing at the front. People gravitate to somebody that's already prepared.
Good. They gravitate to somebody who's prepared. They want to know that you've taken the time to prepare, present, practice, put things together. Anything else?
Enthusiasm.
Oh, enthusiasm. Great. We'll put that with tone, enthusiasm. Any things that could kill your credibility, confidence, gravitas? Poor eye contact. Where do people's eyes tend to go when they're nervous? Their screen, their notes. And sometimes you need to. That's why we put our notes in the PowerPoint notes section so that we can come back to them. We tend to go to our notes when we're nervous, or we tend to go to our shoes, or up in the sky. So looking at each person periodically. I love to find my muses in the audience. It's the one person or two people maybe who are just smiling and nodding at you. And every time I need a boost, I move back to my happy person. And I'm like, and there she is smiling and nodding and taking notes. And it just fills my heart. So then, the other person in the back who's looking at their screen or their Instagram feed, I just try to ignore them. They're dead to me. And I'll just look at the happy people who are keeping me energized and happy. What else can kill your... Ooh, be careful with jokes. It might have been funny to you. It might have been funny to your people, your family, your program, but it might not be funny to other people. Or your delivery may flop.
Now that's one thing we talk about, these are all things you can learn, right? The joking during the presentations, some people, it just seems very natural, they can do it, they are quick to say it and move on. I guess my biggest thing has been if you say something, you don't wait for it. There's always that awkward where people are you get it, this, I don't know. It seems like that's more innate to a person's timing.
It can be, but it can also be practiced. So it's not that you shouldn't be humorous. I mean, Amal's talk had tons of humor in it, for example. I try to put humor in here and there, but if you're telling something that's a joke, just make sure that it's going to land okay. Make sure that be careful with coming up with something humorous on the fly without thinking about it first. Great examples. So here are some components of executive presence, which I think you got most of them. Knowledge, you have to know what you're talking about. Confidence, composure. If you see a speaker who's really nervous, as an audience member, how do you feel? Nervous. You start to sweat. You get vicariously nervous and awkward feeling for them. You want to create connection before content. If you don't think I care about you or know what I'm talking about, if you don't feel connected to me as the speaker, you are not going to retain the content. So connection before content. Charisma, that goes into a lot of the things we said. Tone, body language, appearance, image, and voice. Prepare and practice. So how to speak with confidence. A lot of preparation, a lot of practice. Developing a thought awareness. So let's imagine you're giving a talk next week to a group that's maybe bigger or more prestigious than you're used to. Maybe you're used to your own residence and it's 20 people, but now it's somebody else's residency program and 100 people. What are the thoughts that create the anxiety for you?
Lack of street cred with them.
So what's the thought? They're not going to believe me?
Or just like I have really good rapport with my residents, so they take me at face value in order to prove myself to be my talk. Or maybe if I don't meet all of those gravitas things, they're still gonna respect me. Whereas if I would go into a new place with new people, they're like, who on earth is this person? Why is he
Who's this dude?
about X?
Why is he here in cutoff shorts that he was gardening in? Yeah, so they're not going to take me seriously. What other thoughts lead to the anxiety?
They're more expert than me.
They know more than me. I shouldn't be talking about this unless I am the world expert in it.
You're representing
Ooh.
organization, institution.
Yeah.
There's a lot of responsibility in that.
Yeah, you're an ambassador for your school. If they don't like me, they're never going to invite anybody else. They're going to think it's a bad institution. Any others? They're going to think I'm a fraud. They're not going to like me. They're going to be bored. They're going to walk out halfway through. Sorry? They brought tomatoes. So develop a thought awareness that look at those thoughts. Are they true? Are they going to think I'm a fraud? I mean, the worst I can be is boring for an hour. The worst I can be is boring, but they're probably not going to hate me, which is what my brain says. My brain says they're going to physically hate you. That's probably not true. The worst they'll do is just be bored for an hour. So by looking at our thoughts, we can develop more awareness of the untruths that we're telling ourselves. How to speak with confidence. Word fillers. These are a problem or a challenge for many people to overcome. We use word fillers for several reasons. One is it's just become a habit and it's normal as part of our speech. Another, though, is because we are retaining the stage. If I am talking to Zach about my afternoon or my evening last night, and I say to Zach, hey, Zach, I went out to eat at this Mexican place, and the enda is communicating that I am still speaking, that I want the floor. If I don't say that, if I say, hey, last night we went out to this Mexican place, he will then realize that it is his turn to speak, and he will say, cool, how was it? Or yes, I like Mexican, or I don't like Mexican, I'm lactose intolerant. So by using a filler word, that indicates that I still want the floor. Whereas when you are speaking, you don't need to do that. It's better to just use a pause. Pauses might make you as the speaker feel very uncomfortable, but usually, unless they're very protracted, the audience will tolerate pauses pretty well. One strategy is instead of saying the filler words, say it in your head, but just pause with your voice. And that is something that takes a lot of practice. Monotony. Hopefully most of you you're ER docs, you're pretty energetic, so that's not a problem for you. Repetitive vocal patterns, uptick is one of them, and I won't play you this video because PowerPoint is not playing well. Uptalk, you mentioned. Another one is vocal fry. What's vocal fry? Anyone heard that term? Guttural, so it's when you're like, you're speaking way too low for your register. I went out to Mexican and it was really good. And this sounds silly, but we do it a lot, especially when we're nervous. When we're nervous, we constrict our vocal cords, and sometimes we talk a little too low and it gets really scratchy. It's also just a trend. If you listen to the Kardashians talk, that's pretty much the whole time when they talk. That's how it goes. And so let me play you an example. Actually, I do want to play this one because it's fun. All right. Vocal fry. Here you go. To see how you'll see how common it is.
What can I get you?
I'd like a large coffee.
Okay, so hot coffee.
Hot coffee.
Okay, room for cream.
Totally leave room for cream.
Why are you talking like that?
Why are you talking like that?
Because this is my voice.
This is my voice.
No, it's not.
All
I
right,
hate talking
so
a minute ago, and I don't talk like that.
an unfortunate habit that we have. What is the solution? The solution is to speak louder. When we speak louder, we can't use vocal fry. Other execution strategies. Start strong. Walk up boldly and introduce yourself. You will have maybe a few seconds when people are making their opinion of you. If you go up and you're like, hi guys, we're gonna start now and we're gonna talk about the thyroid, hey guys. No, don't do that. Walk up boldly, take command of the room. We're going to start now, or start with a story, or welcome people. I would avoid too much filler in that start. Look at these two examples of a start. Hey everyone, I'm Christina and I'm from UNC and I'm really excited to be here. It's really nice weather today, it's so warm. And I'm gonna talk about hyperthyroid. Okay, so I did a lot of things that I just said we shouldn't. What if instead we say, if you haven't seen Thyroid Storm in the last month, you've probably missed it. Thyroid storm kills more than 100,000 people every year. I just made that statistic up. That's not true. But let's say it were. Hi everyone, I'm Christina, I'm at UNC, and today I'm going to explain the difference between thyroid storm and just regular garden variety hyperthyroidism, and why it is important to your practice. So I still gave you my name, I told you where I'm from, I think, but instead leading with, this is why this is important to you, and then back into who I am. You don't really care about who I am, it doesn't matter to you. So why would I lead with that? Start strong. It's a good idea, especially if you're nervous, to memorize the first minute of your speech. Once you get through that first minute, usually the butterflies are subsiding and you're into your groove and you're getting going. But by memorizing the first minute, then you can help reduce the anxiety. Set the tone for excitement. You are going to be the most excited person in the room. So if you have really low energy, then your audience is going to be well-nigh catatonic. So set the tone for excitement. Pay attention to your body movements. And this is something that is hard to notice in yourself. And so it's a good idea to get someone to give you feedback. So Sarah, I am empowering you to give me feedback at the end on my body movements. The first time I did this, the first time I spoke at ASAP back in, I forget now, 2017-ish, they assign you a speaking coach who is supposed to help you and go watch your session and give you feedback. And I had worked for months making my talks perfect, if I do say so. I thought, perfect. And I had practiced, I knew everything that I was gonna say on every slide. And the person who was giving me feedback, she came and watched one of them, and afterwards I went up to her to receive her glowing praise. Because that's what we want when we say we want feedback, is we want glowing praise. And instead she said to me, yeah, your talk was fine, but your stance was too wide. And I thought, my stance was too wide? I didn't know that was a thing that could happen to someone, and I had no idea. And if she hadn't told me that, now everyone's like looking at my shoes, I would never have noticed or even thought about my stance. And now I try to be more cognizant of having a narrower stance, because apparently my wide stance was distracting for her. I don't know. Also, when you're delivering, react to your environment. Sometimes you get the impression that people are so locked into their presentation that there could be a fire alarm, sprinklers and all, and they would keep going on with their p-values and their next slide, please. So react to your environment. If somebody walks in and looks lost, you can react and say, can I help you? If there's some loud noises in the room next door, you can acknowledge it if it's not distracting, or ask somebody to go help figure out what's going on. Video yourself. This is non-negotiable. You will not notice your strange wide stance or the way that your arms flap if you don't video yourself. That was one of the first things I found when I videoed, is I had weird floppy wrists. They would just like flap in the breeze. And so after I noticed that, I became much more aware and intentional about keeping my wrists in a normal human position and not a flapping bird-like position. And get feedback from others. And then finish strong. It is very awkward when the speaker just stops speaking and you don't know, having a panic attack? Did they have a stroke? Should I do some CPR? What's going on? Instead, make sure you end with something powerful, a story, a recap, a summary, a call to action, a quote, and then make it obvious when you're done. Thank you so much. I'll be happy to stay for questions. And then they can all clap, and you can go on with your lives without that very awkward situation. These were our ABCs, and now I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to talk about taking your speaking to bigger stages and maybe even getting paid for it. Yeah, Sean.
I noticed you have the mic that you carry. Like, do you bring that with you if they don't?
The mic. You can't really bring a lavalier mic because it has to work with their system. When possible, I always want a lavalier mic. I do always bring my own clicker in case they don't have one, and I bring my own computer and dongle. And with a lavalier mic, you have to, this necklace is fine, power brooch. Some necklaces, they scratch it and make noise. Take off your ID badge, otherwise when you turn your head, it will scratch, and put the mic right in the middle. If you put it on the side, then every time I turn, then it gets quiet. And then it gets really loud, and then it gets quiet. So little tips there. Tracy.
I think it is important. There's several things. You can set up the room. We talked earlier about coming in early. I move tables. I pull out chairs. If they give me a handheld mic, I have always asked beforehand for a lavalier. I use my hands. And so now if I've got a remote in this and a mic in the other, it's really stilted for me. It was funny. I don't know if it ended up or not, but the batteries weren't working on the remote. And all four of us said, well, I've got one. I actually carry two because it drives me nuts to either have to keep going back or to have to ask somebody, could you change the slide? Could you change it? It messes up my flow. I also, one other thing I was going to tell you, I keep in mind when I am using slides that my last slide is number 72. And maybe this one graph that I really wanted people to get to was 45. So that if I'm running over and I have to change on time, you just walk over, you hit 79 and return, and it will go right to whatever that slide was. So you don't have to scroll down and look through. Because when people then are thinking, oh, look at all those slides I didn't get to see, they're now irritated at you. And as soon as they're irritated at you, we were talking about this, they start picking on your shoes, your stance, how you flip your hair, all those types of things. Sarah, you're still here. Why aren't you being paid by Canva?
That's why I'm here at your talk.
So let's just for a second think about this. How many, 30 folks in here? What's the smallest program? Who's brand new? All right, so how many residents do you have right now?
We have none right now.
Okay, how many?
With our first class of 8.
So you're going to start with 8. Oh, I was wondering where. So 8 for you all. Who's got the largest one, do you think, here? How many do you have? 25 to 3-year program? All right, so 75. Anybody else do the quick math here? We have 30 people with a minimum of 8, some as high as 75. How many lives are you impacting per year? How many people walking out of here right now are going out and saying, Canva? I never heard of Canva. I'm going to go buy Canva. I'm going to go look up Canva. So you write that up and you say, listen, this is how many people I educate every year. I just made a sale for Canva of how many lives right here. So let's talk about how to get paid, because I think that's really important. You are getting paid. You're just not getting paid very well, right? You are getting paid. Each one of you is a faculty member here. I belong to several Facebook groups. A lot of them are so that I can find out what other people are doing. There's side gigs, we're on several of them together, looking at what other people are doing, because what you want to do is take your side gig to where it becomes your primary gig, and you're making money to put away for retirement or kids, or if your program hits is no longer there, or your contract is lost. So let's talk about how we get there. And there are a couple things I wanted to first hit. You must strategically do this. is it's a lot of work. You are now the writer, director, producer, as well as the business person, tax accountant, salesperson. You need an administrative assistant. You are now the administrative assistant because there's so many things that go into getting your name up and out there, consistently showing up and showing up at the top of your form. You know, Ama will tell you the same. When you receive an award, they're like, oh, wow, you're such a great speaker. Like that came up overnight. No, that was 30 years of speaking to the Boy Scouts, Kiwanis Club, Ladies Church on menopause. I remember the first time I spoke on menopause. I look back, I am so embarrassed now because I knew nothing about menopause. Now I'm like, I have to go back and tell these ladies, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do. It was pathetic. But you do all of these things, so it's practice. You are going to be a great speaker if you keep doing it. So at the beginning, I'll tell you, speak for free, and then stop. You at some point have to recognize what your value is, and then put a monetary thing to it. So who can you go and speak to? Who? Residency programs? About how much does a residency program pay if you come to speak for them? Pardon me? Yeah, often it is $0, but not always. In a lot of cases, you can go speak to them for maybe travel or to be able to write it on your CV if you're coming up for promotion. So one of the things I do almost every place when I go to speak, I will tell you right now, I will come speak to any one of your programs. You know why? Because I have friends and family all over the country. And so what I'll do is I'll take that hotel and that flight. I don't need any money for it because I'm going to take my daughter out to dinner. I'm going to go, I would have gone to see my mom or my aunt or something like that. So you work things around of how you get paid. So one of them for us are residency programs. What else? Where else could you get paid? How about colleges? They're always looking for types of speakers. How about trade shows, associations, universities, organizations, and then the ultimate one is keynote. In between there, there's writing your own ebook or your book or having a website and selling those types of things. So what you have to do is figure out what your value is. Right now, when you make a slide set and you get a really great picture, I want you to keep that. Christina said, don't throw your slides away. Don't delete them. Put them someplace else or drag them to another one. Because when you've put the time and energy, you want to be able to monetize that later on. And we've learned that in medicine, right? You take an article and it becomes a presentation and an abstract and then whatever, you keep moving. And the same is true for when you're getting up to speak. So there's 3 ways to be seen. First is have a niche. What is yours? You can't do it all. I mean, you can if you want to go to a residency program, you talk about all EM topics, but figure out what your niche is. What value do I bring? What is one sentence that could be said about you as a speaker? You're going to have to really drill down to what is it that I bring? What mine is, I help professionals navigate whatever their workplace is, whatever the challenges are in their workplace. So if I'm going to somebody, I say, hi, I'm Dr. Sanson. This is what I do, and this is what I can bring to your group. So you're going to have to figure that out for yourselves. Now, I did, for the first 20 years, I spoke on anything that ASAP asked me to. ENT tricks of the trade, still one of my most favorite talks. The anal things coming out of your anus, not my favorite, and I was really happy when I was not asked back a second time to do that. But what happened with ASAP is you would start doing those kind of EM topics that get brought in, and then where I became known as I was an ED director. At that time, there were like 3 of us who were women who were in leadership as ED directors. And so we got asked to do it over and over and over again. And so then you get known in what you are. So one is pick a niche. The second is have an incredible wealth of knowledge on that topic. Like maybe it's your research. Or I always think of Jeff Klein, D. Dimer, PE. You can't think of PE in emergency medicine and not think of Jeff Klein, right? So what are you doing? What research do you have that you could translate that into being a speaker? And then the third is some type of uniqueness, notoriety. You know, just blanked on her name. Clinton, dress, Monica Lewinsky, thank you. It's like we're doing password here. Monica Lewinsky was asked to come give quite a few talks based on a uniqueness that she has worked now 30 years to have taken back. Michael Cohen right now will be asked to go speak based on uniqueness. There are certain things that may or may not be unique about you. Did you climb the Himalayas? Did you start a brand new residency program and get them through, you know, like changes in the contract or whatever? What uniqueness do you bring to the place? So I think that's a big thing. Your niche, some wealth of knowledge, or a very unique aspect of what you bring to it. You have got to now spend quite a bit of time improving your visibility, your credibility, building a reputation, and a brand. Amal has a brand. What's Amal's brand? Yeah, okay, it's not EKGs. What is it about EKGs? It is EKGs, yeah, but what is it about EKGs? Seriously, takes the fear out of it. He brings it down to where I've sat in EKGs, and I have literally thought, please don't ask me, please don't ask me. I know what a P is, but do not ask me to do rate or rhythm right now. He takes it to a level where you're like, oh yeah, I got that. I didn't feel stupid. So what he did was bring it to a level that the common man, woman would have gotten it a long time ago, but the common man can get to it. I know. So that's probably the humor. Somebody's going to write it back. So I will tell you a couple things when you do talk. Humor that'll fall flat. You'll hear about it. When you curse, sometimes it goes through. Mostly somebody will write you about it. So anyway, the evals go though. So I start at what's my purpose? Who's my audience? What are the logistics? When I'm trying to think of, will I get paid? If it is an industry asking me to come speak, they have a budget. Even nonprofits have money. Nonprofit does not mean no money. You've got to ask for it. So that becomes a big one. How do you ask for it? Anybody here think, well, shit, what do I say? What do you say? What do you typically pay your speakers? Now, if I'm coming to your residency program, where are you? UPMC. And you say, oh man, could you come give that lecture? Great, what do you typically pay your speakers? And what would you say?
You want the truth?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so zero, which is probably true. Although most places, especially if you go to your chair, you could probably get a flight, maybe a night hotel. Although I have couch surfed enough throughout the years, if you know somebody. Or you could maybe get an honorarium. An honorarium is typically anything under $1,000. You might be able to come up with that. But what I could say is, you know what I really need? I need a sizzle reel. Anybody know what a sizzle reel is? That's like 10 seconds of you speaking and looking cool or sounding cool or commanding or not pacing and not of capturing people's attention, because I want to put that on my website. Or when I do have an opportunity, I want to be able to send them 30 seconds, 40 seconds of me speaking. Otherwise, what they're going to do is Google all of your YouTube videos that somebody took where you may or may not have been yourself or at your best. So do you think anybody could tape it? And do you have anybody in your IT department that could maybe give me 1 to 2 minute snippets? Or how about, do you have an email? Could I maybe get an email listing from your group? Could we hand out cards? Or I just finished an ebook. Would you mind if I let people know about it? Or I just wrote a book. I self-published it, so I wasn't able to go through a big one. Maybe could I have a signing in the back of the room? Or could you, when you go to Cord, could you tell everybody how well I did and then find the people that have money and have them ask me next time? So I think there are things that you can negotiate. We often think it's just the salary, just the number. Now, if you're going to the Kiwanis Club, you will maybe get a cold beer. And it probably won't even be cold by the time you get to it, right? You're going to get a fish sticks and a cold beer, and by the time you sit down, it's going to be icky. But you practiced, and you made the eye contact, and you learned how to make that grouchy guy kind of finally smile at you. Seriously, you were learning more than they probably were. All they wanted to know was, what size car seat do I get my grandkids, right? So that's the Kiwanis Club. There are the true nonprofits, but you'd be surprised what you can get out of them. And I'll tell them, I will talk to anybody if it's on Zoom or if it's relatively close, like 30-minute drive, you know, and it's a nonprofit. Why would you charge them? Because somebody is going to be watching you. Somebody's going to be married or dating or on a future board and call back. So I recently applied for a job in Wisconsin. A friend of mine said, hey, come up here, we'll do every other day, we'll play while we're up there. And I called to talk to the medical director because I do direct contracting, I don't go through locums. And he said, don't worry, I heard you speak in Gatlinburg 4 years ago. So you'd be surprised what comes back around to you. Now, if you're going there, if you're now in the university setting, they have money. They absolutely have money. If you are in industries, so you can, one of the niches that you can have, either the niche or the education, the research, the background, is with pharma. We often give it a bad name in academics, but if you're out there giving great information and in a way that people connect, I think that makes sense to lecture for pharma. If you're out there selling your, snake oil, then it doesn't make sense. So I think pharma is another place, especially for us as we're advancing. Organizations, United Healthcare, Optum, all of these HMOs, PPOs, they need information. They need to know how to get out Narcan to their folks. They need to learn how to decrease their rate of overdoses. We're the exact people that should be doing that. You also, and what I've done is I know pretty much 5 or 6 states of what their CME is every year that they have to have. And I have 4 killer lectures on each one of those. Intimate partner violence, medical errors, trafficking. And I go to the local areas and I say, I'll come to your facility. And they say, well, and I say, what do you typically pay? They tell me, well, we don't. I said, well, how many people do you think are going to come? How many? 50? 300? I said, my charge is $5,000. And you would be amazed at the times, like, okay, if we know that you'll come, we know that we can tape it for other people to watch, and they know that you will give a good talk. That's what goes around, is to know that you bring value to what you're doing. So a couple things I wanted to make sure that you recognize is that it's not just the fee, footage, sales, connections. Oh my gosh. Like all of you, I'm going to expect 1 or 2 or 3 of you in the next several years to ring me up, or you can text me. Just showed my age there. I'm an Xer, but I cusp into a baby boomer. And say, hey, could you come speak about whatever? And I pretty much guarantee that I will tell you yes. Can you go to cool sites? Where's it going to be? You invite me to Hawaii, I will find my own flight. You find a great hotel, cool people to hang around with. So this was my first year out of residency. I was, it was in the military. They own you, so you couldn't even get any fee. Anybody here been military? Yeah, so what happens if you get an honorarium?
Well, I wasn't medicine military.
Oh, you weren't?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
I got medicine outside.
So in the military, if you get paid for anything that's outside of what your regular job is, you have to donate it. So it gets donated, and most of it was to National Kidney Society or Association, whatever it was, which was cool. I feel good about it, but you never were able to get paid for those things. But once I got out, we had just started our brand new residency program in Florida, and this guy calls up and he says, "Do you know anybody who would want to lecture on a cruise?" And I'm like, me. And I do probably 2 to 3 cruises a year, getting paid to lecture. Took my girls, when they started college, they had been to 39 different countries. So while sometimes you don't get paid, you just get the cruise paid for or the flight paid for, there are different ways of getting paid. So here's what goes into it. Your speaker profile. What's your bio? Get it down, cool, pick out something cool. You know, mine said I'm prior military, I was prior leadership, that I was with this group or that group, and then I throw in some international medicine or something like that. What is cool, short, sweet bio about you? What is your profile? If I Googled you right now, what would I find? Somebody has been taping your things. Somebody has been putting out little things. You wrote an article, it's going to come up. So start filling it up so that when they do a search engine, when they search for you, what is going to come up? And if it's crap or it was something that you no longer, start feeding it, writing those articles, doing those quick talks, making sure that everything else gets buried below it. Hashtags. You want to talk at women's conferences? Then when you are writing something in Twitter or in LinkedIn, you hashtag women's conference. Wellness speaker, resilience speaker, wilderness medicine, PE. What is it that your niche is, and start having those hashtags so that when people search, you come up. Now what I want you to do is to figure out people, follow somebody. Christina, I follow Christina. I will follow Sarah. I've been following them all my whole life. There you are, Sarah. So connect with people and watch, where are they speaking? Who are they involved with? And then either try and connect with them or watch for those. Start looking for events. They're all over. They're at your high school, they're at your colleges, they're at the universities that are around you, they're at the institutions that are around you, and start making a spreadsheet. Because what you want to do is, okay, I'll drive 50 miles, or I'd be willing to fly to this one. You put it in, who's the contact, put in the website so you can get it, and then you come up with your little, hello, I'm Dr. Sanson. This is what I do. This is what I bring to I see you have a conference coming up. When will your speaker application be? They're short, concise questions that can be answered easily by whoever I happen to contact with through their website or the email that they've got. And then they tell me the speaker application is going to be in July. It's often 6 months to a year in advance. So I am working already. I have lectures for 2027. I'm hoping I'm alive. I'm hoping that I'm still mobile. I'm hoping that the world isn't 120 degrees, but I have them set up in advance because it was 2 years ago when I answered the speaker application. So find out when the speaker application is, and that's what I mean, you need an administrative assistant who's starting to write these things down so that you can follow up and send it in. Now they may tell you, we don't have any budget this year. You say, okay, well, next year. And then I tell them, this is typically what I charge. Now, if it's a regular university, maybe about $1,500. If it is a organization, I tell them $5,000. If it's a keynote, let me tell you this. So this happened several years ago. Myself and 2 very well-known men in ASAP, not in this room right now, we were asked to speak together. And they asked me, what is your fee? And I thought, I'm going to go for it. I said $10,000. They said, okay. And I'm like, shit, I should have asked for more. I mean, seriously, they didn't even bat an eye, did not bat an eye. This was a major university. Now, my niece lived there, so I went there and I had a great weekend. I would have gone for nothing, but I'm like, that's totally cool. So then I went to my 2 co-speakers who I have co-spoke with for decades. And I said to one of them, so I asked for 10,000, what did you get? Now he wouldn't tell me, but he did say, you underestimated yourself. Then I asked the other guy, and he refused to tell me. Now I will tell you, I think that's part of our problem. We should be telling each other, listen, United gave me 5,000 to give a 30-minute talk about generations in the workplace. Make sure you ask for 10. Because by you getting something doesn't mean you pulled it away from me. There's enough other stuff that's out there. So I think you should be talking. So you need your bio, your profile. What are your promotion and marketing things? It can be a website. If it's a website, make sure it actually works. Have good pictures on there, because a glitchy website, you will lose every millennial and every Gen Z. They're like, hell, why would I bring somebody? She's probably going to be up there trying to figure out how to get Zoom to start or not. You know, the things that we go through. Are you searchable, either by your name or your hashtags? And then the sizzle reel. I think that's a big one. Now you can put small ones. You can take a quick, like 15 seconds, because everybody's attention span is about 8 seconds right now. 15 seconds, so that when I call you up and I say, American Heart Association, I would like to come speak to you about, this is what I bring to the audience. This is what I think I can help your audience with. Here's what I look like on stage. Here's what I look like. And be able to send them. Now be prepared to be told no. Guess what? I didn't have the job yesterday anyway. So if I don't have the job today, I didn't have it yesterday. Rejection is never personal. That is huge. All right? Rejection is never personal. I tried. I learned how to write a better letter. I learned how to write something more concise. I found other people to connect with, and then try again. Follow up in a couple weeks. Follow up in a couple months. Follow up in a year or 2. And then go to things like this, or go to ASEP, or go to United's, whatever, stand around, watch their speakers, figure out who they looked at. I think this is a great one where you walk up and you say, I looked, and you had no female speakers. You had nobody of color. You had nobody speaking on healthcare. You had no whatever. What you want to do is find what they were missing, and now I am who can step into it. And be willing to put yourself out there, show your value, and then get the money. So the big thing is to recognize everybody has money. A job of an organizer, they'll tell you, they are taught to underbid. They are taught to tell you we have no money and to see what you'll expect. Typically, what do you charge? What do you pay your speakers? And then if they come back at you and they say, well, what would you want for a keynote? I'm telling you, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. A keynote is where you're going in to grab people's attention. If you're going to a university, maybe $1,000. If you're going to a residency, maybe travel or $500. They can then work. If they say, man, we don't have that, look for the other things that can help you, the footage, the connections, the email, the testimonials, so you can put them on your website. And or to say, well, think about me next year, or when you do have the money. It's kind of a constant, but then once it does start to flow in, it can absolutely replace at least half of your clinical and potentially more as you move on. If you're really into it, you can get a speaker's bureau. I know some folks, they take about 10%. But if they're consistently getting you $10,000 and $15,000 keynotes, I'll give them 10%. So you can start ratcheting it up as you move along. But I think the biggest thing is prepare, 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 so that you really come across well, you can connect with any kind of audience, know your own value, and then be willing to ask for it. Any questions at all? All right, if you do have any, I think you should, either way, it's tracysanson@gmail.com. I am very happy at any point ever. If you want to call me up and say, they just asked me and this is what they're asking for, I am really good at negotiating for other people. I'm telling you, you'll get off that phone thinking like, damn, I should do whatever. So give me a call, I'll help you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
So there's one more letter here which is feedback. We've talked about your audience, basic message, communication strategies, design, execution, and you need to get feedback. How to get feedback? Well, ask people for it. If you're speaking, plant a few people in the audience and ask them to give you feedback on your slides, on your body movement, on your communication. There is, in the printout on the back page, is a feedback rubric that you are welcome to use and you are welcome to adapt or use for anything you want to. Your homework is this. I want you to record yourself giving a 1 or 2 minute presentation. It could be with slides, it could be just straight up, slide free. But record yourself and then watch it 3 different ways. First, watch it with no video. Just listen to yourself. Notice your verbal fillers, notice your tics, notice your tendencies. Then watch it with no sound, just on video, to watch your verbal, your body movements, to watch anything distracting. Do you fiddle with your rings? Are you bopping side to side? And then watch it with both video and sound. This is an extremely painful but very, very useful exercise. How to overcome speaking anxiety. If this video makes your palms start to sweat, practice a lot and start in a safe environment. Start somewhere small. Maybe that's your own residency program. Maybe that is a smaller group, just the interns. Start small and build your confidence. But also recognize that low stress, we don't perform well, and very, very high stress, we don't perform well, but a certain amount of stress actually helps us. And there's a lot of research on stress reframing, which just by saying to yourself, this feeling of my palms getting sweaty and my heart racing, this is the feeling of my body preparing me to perform really, really well. And by saying that to yourself, you can actually, tons of studies on this, perform better on whatever task it is you're doing, whether it's an exam, a performance, an interview, etc. Also, just notice it, greet it. You could name your speaking anxiety. Oh, yep, there she is again. That's Bertha, my speaking anxiety. She's up here just to pay a little visit, but you don't need to listen to her and you don't need to let her derail you. We are running close on time, so we're gonna finish here with the take-home points. That giving a great talk is important for you and you can do it. You can learn from both good and bad talks. And we've given you the ABCs for resuscitating your boring talks. Education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. In 5 years' time, when you've forgotten who I am, who's Sarah and Tracy, and maybe you won't forget Amal, I don't know. When you've forgotten anything that we've said, I want to hear from a few of you. In 5 years, what will you remember from today? Power broach. Engage the audience. Sternal rub the audience.
I should be telling more stories.
Tell more stories. Any other things? Get some Narcan. Good. So these are our names. You can find us on Twitter or Google or LinkedIn or anywhere else. It's been a pleasure talking with you. In addition to the Slideology book that Sarah showed, here are some others that are some of my favorites. And wonderful to meet you all today. I hope you have a great time at SAEM. Thank you all for spending the afternoon with us.